And just gonna make sure the stream is streaming. We are streaming. So usually, guys, I start the cast with a little guitar song, but as you can see, I'm trapped. I've got a little pug on my lap, and I'm completely trapped. What am I supposed to do? I don't know what to do to kill these first couple of minutes as people start to come in. What am I supposed to do? I guess I'll just amuse you with adorable poses with my pug.
Oh, I know.
Such a good boy, buddy. Such a good boy. What an interesting day I had today. Because of the video that I've posted, the clip I did from last night's stream was of the Uyghur genocide, right? Talking about how it's like this nonsense thing. And man, the clapping back is getting stupid. Like, it's getting really, really dumb. It's getting to be on the same level, like really, really straightforwardly on the same level as flat earthers. Like it is like talking to anti-mask types. It is like talking to anti-mask types at this point. That the people, hey Major, how you doing today, bud? Good to see you. That the people who are now acting as apologists for the Uyghur genocide legend and the myth, like, they know they don't have any evidence. They don't even bother sharing mainstream articles anymore because they know that the mainstream articles are basically just stenography for the CIA, and all you have to do is literally read the article. And they're not even bothering doing that anymore. It's just shade throwing and insults now. They know they don't have anything left, and there is gonna come a time where the UN is going to release a document. This is what's happening, is that the UN has been planning for some time now to release a document. They've probably already got people in Xinjiang and in China investigating this. And, when you have an investigator in and they're actually looking around there and they're talking about it, right? And they're probably talking to people and there's sources, and there's probably a CIA agent who is close to the story, who is saying yeah, dude, this UN report is going to destroy the UN, the Uyghur genocide narrative, right? They know that's coming, and they know that's coming, which is why they're shifting the narrative, right? And it's just getting embarrassing to talk to these guys now, and it's like they're just petulant children. So that's been my whole day. I've been tooling around doing my research, figuring things out, and then I pop onto Reddit very briefly. And people have sent me a bunch of notes, and they're all just dumb morons being idiots. So, all that's left now is the U.S. just bombing the place, right? Just bombing the place. That's what's left now. So, as we await this inevitability, hey, Bumbleguppy, how you doing? A happy bread day to you as well. A happy bread day to you as well. I'm feeling a little anxious at the moment because we got a protest tomorrow. Isabella has been really going through. What a story Isabella's been going through. She, of course, suffers from many disabilities and many things, and it ended up with her in hospital. She big question marks about whether or not she'd be able to come tomorrow because of it, and she just from the determination and the will, right? Just Isabella's determination, I feel, is the thing that's carrying her forward. And hopefully, she's one of those people who, will just do it herself and will just do all this kind of stuff. And the absurd, the absurd willpower that she has, but it runs counter to, she needs to be resting and she needs to be letting people help her and do her work for her. But I know you guys know the type I'm talking about, right? That just has this overwhelming willpower. So she's gonna come, but hopefully she'll relinquish the mic more often. I'm gonna play some of my music. So if you are in the Toronto region tomorrow, come down to College and Yonge at 3:00. You can hear me play. You'll hear Barry talk. Barry of Socialist Action. Always good to hear Barry. And we'll have a little street protest. as we're attempting to do once a month. Okay, buddy, you're going to go down. I know, buddy. I know. Brr, brr, brr. Grumble, grumble, grumble. There you go, buddy. Good boy. I read in National Post, already a good start, right? The National Post, certainly a reputable news source, by Adam Zivo, called "China's Lack of Immigration Will Make It a More Dangerous Superpower." Okay, that's an interesting perspective. China's lack of immigration will make it a more dangerous superpower. I wonder what the logic is there. Because, like, China does have, like, people immigrate to China. Like, that happens. But, like, it's just the framing of China as dangerous, right? Like, this constant framing of China as this, like, dangerous superpower, while literally the superpower that's on the stage is, like, a monster that has literally nuked other people. And it's just like, I feel like there is a lot of anxiety and fear surrounding China, because China could go crazy. Like, it could just, like, go the American way and start bombing people and doing all kinds of crazy shit. It's completely possible, but I prefer to base my decision making on what is happening, not what might happen, right? I don't like to live in this fantasy space of, like, possibilities. I like to live in the space of what is actually occurring, which seems to be more and more difficult to do as time goes forward. Got to admire that spirit. There's a Twitter person I follow, Leftward Swing. She is First Nations and she's disabled, but her spirit is huge. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, Ruth, how you doing? Well, guys, you're the first batch in, so why not let's do the number pick just for some fun. Who knows? Maybe it'll be my time. I'm going to go with you know what? I'm going to leave it till the last moment.
Number.
I'm going to leave it till the last moment.
October 12th.
That's what I'm going to do.
2021.
Here we go.
10 balls.
10 balls.
Each ball has a number. Numbers 1
Got a 1
through
from Ruth,
10.
a 6 from Bumble, 7 from Major, the divine number.
Whirl the numbers.
I am going to go with 8.
Pick a number.
I'm doing an 8. I've never once won this thing. The
Today's
day that I
number
win, I'm going to go
is
get ice cream if I win. 6. Bumble Guppy. Good job, Bumble Guppy. You did it. The forces aligned. Hey, I love you too, Alex. Good to see you, bud. Are you coming to tomorrow's protest? Right. Yeah, the scariest thing China can do is prove once and for all that the U.S. capitalism is literally hell. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna get obvious, right? It's gonna get real obvious real soon. And who do you love now, Dad? I mean, it was a pretty bad article, to be honest. Of course it was. It's in the National Post, right? The National Post will publish anything, dude. Like, they'll publish anything. They don't give a fuck. Like, they don't care at all. Like, if Conrad Black wants to publish some schlocky bullshit, overtly racist nonsense in the National Post, they'll let him, right? Like, they're publishing, like, updates on Jordan Peterson, and like Rex Murphy still has a fucking article, you know? Like, the National Post has steadily turned into just, like, another National Enquirer, except instead of it being like Bat Boy, you know, it's focusing on just, like, legends and myths in the political sector, right? It is getting, like, real, and anytime I read a National Post article, like, the important thing to do when you read an article is to find their source, right? That's the first thing that you should do. And quite often I find myself clicking on an article and I'll just scan it quickly, right? And it's easy to pick out the source because it's usually like 3 words or 2 words that are both capitalized, right? So you're just like, and then you find it. And usually they land on something like the Fraser Institute, which here in Canada, the Fraser Institute is just one of these billionaire neoliberal think tanks that are wrong about literally everything they say, because it's no longer an economic system, it's a religious ideology. And once you understand that it's a religious ideology, it becomes really easy to see through it. And so what you have is you have this billionaire-funded newspaper aggregating billionaire-funded religious ideology think tanks, right, through their newspaper, which they own both or they have stake in both, and it gets presented as if this is credible research from a credible news place, and like, if you're kind of a rural dummy, honestly, who reads the National Post, right? Who's actually taking the National Post seriously? It's prairie folk primarily, right? Like, that's who's doing it, and it all flows into that sort of overriding point that I think is so dangerous about what's happening these days, which is that there's huge sections of the populace who simply don't want to acknowledge that there are systems that exist, and are of varying degree of credibility, right? Because if you say that there's a system and it exists, like, and you've got to do work to figure that out. You got to like analyze and all of this, and it's difficult to do. It's much easier to just pretend we're all individuals working in the individual world and all this. But if you don't understand that there's a system of disinformation where you have like the Fraser Institute disseminating its bullshit through the National Post, then you're going to be totally hopeless when it comes to realizing that like there are CSIS organizations, CSIS being the CIA of Canada, and the CIA running like disinformation campaigns, right? Like, you're just not going to understand that that's the case until it's too late, right? Until it's after the fact. Like, it's amazing what's happening with this Uyghur genocide thing, guys. Like, it's amazing to watch. Like, we're watching the tilt happen in real time. The shift from there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq to oops, there were no weapons of mass destruction, right? Like, we're seeing that in real time, and we're like right here right now where it's like, and what was so annoying about the WMD thing, and what will be annoying about the Uyghur genocide thing, is that once it tips over and it's obvious, they'll just stop talking about it, right? And then late night comedians might bring it up, or like people off on the fringes might bring it up, but like, and it'll just be like the look at Venezuela line, right? Like, once it became obvious that it wasn't socialism, it was U.S. sanctions, they just stopped talking about it, right? And yet again, there is like another concrete example of the depths of depravity that the U.S. empire is willing to go to lie people into war, and they'll just ignore it, right? It'll just be completely ignored. I saw someone retweet CNN reporting on One America News complaining they're right-wing. Come to find out CNN and OAN are both owned by AT&T. Yeah, and AT&T has actually taken a share hit over this. Like, now that information has come out. But, like, that's American politics all the way, right? The same companies own both sides of the conversation, right? That, like, CNN and OAN are supposed to be like at odds with one another, right? Technically, but they're owned by the same people. So it's just a game, right? It's Macho Man Randy Savage coming out and being like, "Oh yeah, brother, I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna tear him apart," and all this, and then he marches up to the ring, and then they cut over to Andre the Giant, who's like, "I am going to smash the little man, Macho Man Randy Savage," and then they go in and they have their fight with whatever result, right? And all of that kind of stuff. And then when the match ends, they both go back into the dressing room, they shake hands, say, "Hey, good night," and they both get paid by Vince McMahon, right? Like, it's not different at all. It's the illusion of choice, exactly. It's the illusion of choice. And yeah, but they shouldn't say it. Like, that's just it. Like, this is what I'm talking about, Bumble Guppy. When I keep saying, you hear me say it almost every day now, right? It's going to get extremely obvious. Like, it's going to get extremely obvious. Like, and I still talk to people on the regular who still think that American politics is actually politics. They actually think that the Democrats and the Republicans are actually, like, fighting each other to improve things for average Americans. Like, like, it's gotten kind of charming almost, where I'm just like, "Oh, sweetheart." Like, I really got to, like, start sitting people down and just be like, "Okay, so we're going to talk about media manipulation and how the billionaire class uses media in order to obfuscate and confuse what is actually going on," right? Because, yeah, American politics is basically professional wrestling. Like, it is. It's completely manufactured. There is no such thing as anyone in the political system who is actually fighting for improving the system or improving or ameliorating needs for the populace. None of that is real. There isn't a single person in the organizations at all whatsoever who is actually genuinely interested in improving the lot for the populace. They're all just playing characters. They're all just characters, right? As soon as you realize this, as soon as you recognize, like, AOC is not different than, like, Hulk Hogan. That Hulk Hogan was, like, the hero and the golden boy and came out and everybody cheered for him and all that kind of stuff, so on and so forth. Goes back into the dressing room, says thanks to the villains, says thanks to the heels, and takes his paycheck from Vince McMahon, who also pays the villains. Exactly the same story. Like, to pretend otherwise at this point is to live in, like, this imaginary dream world. Everything that's being done by every American politician, including someone like Bernie Sanders, is being done specifically as a vanity project for themselves so that they might be the one to attain power. That's it. Exclusively. No exceptions. No exceptions. So that means that when the populace gloms on to, like, oh, he's such a good guy who's gonna fight for that means they've fallen for the grift, right? Because it's all it is now. It's just a series of storytellings and just a series of grifts. There's nothing left. Like, even if there are systems in place in both the Democratic and the Republican Party so that if a genuine person came through the ranks and there was a big upswell of power, and this person, let's say, like, some 18-year-old kid, right? Some 18-year-old high school kid, just fresh out, he starts saying everything is bullshit, we can do way better than this, right? Let's go, USA, USA, and it's all patriotic, and he's got the energy of the populace. There's an enormous protest movement, all of this, and this kid is getting thousands and thousands and thousands of votes, and everybody's going for him, every district is going for them. Well, then the superdelegates will just shut him out, and they'll just put in some establishment kid. That's what will happen every single time. That's how it's structured. That's how it happens. The idea that America is some democracy is foolishness. It's not a democracy at all. Like, it's not a democracy. It just is. It just has the imaging of democracy. It just has the look of a democracy, so that people will continuously believe that funneling your energy into the democratic structure that exists will somehow be useful and somehow spit out benefits for the populace, which, when has it ever done that? Like, really, when has it ever actually spit out anything that was a benefit of the populace, with the exception of the times when the halls of power were surrounded? Like, really think about this, guys. Like, if you have to actually go and surround the halls of power in order to get legislation passed, you don't live in a democracy. Like, a democracy would just naturally spit out benefits for the populace because that's what the people want. That the whole purpose would be like, well, I am voting for this because I would like to have an increase in healthcare. I think a universal healthcare system for everyone would be really, really wonderful. Don't you? And if it was actually the case that the political structure was designed to actually help people, right? If it was actually the case that the political structure was designed to help people, well, then it just naturally would, right? If it was a democracy and the people say this and they elected and I voted for it and all that kind of stuff, and if I don't do it, then I'm not gonna, we'll do it. But that's not what happens, right? That's not the case at all. So, like, we got to stop pretending. We got to stop pretending about this. I do love this comment that you made here, Bumbleguppy. It's a pay-per-view democracy iron cage match this Saturday. Yeah, exactly, man. Exactly. So let's have a little bit of good news. Little pop of good news here. Now that we're consistently below last year's COVID numbers, I decided to overlay 2020 and 2021 cases on the same graph. So this is the daily and then the average as well. That's why the lines look sort of weird. I really want to draw attention to here because this is actually the most important part, because this was last year's numbers. You can see we were in this like up we went, right? This is this year's. This is what's going on. And we had a big dip here, and then we were threatening to go up. This is in Ontario, of course. We were threatening to go up, and then it plateaued, and now we're in a decline, and we're way below last year's numbers, right? Even if we were to shift this around, right, the fact that there was a dip, and now it looks like there could be a plane, maybe even if there's an increase. But honestly, I think the vaccine and what's been going on here in Ontario with the vaccine has been very successful for us. Should this trend continue in Ontario, it does look like we'll actually have a very strong Christmas. And honestly, if we carry through with a strong Christmas into the spring and the numbers are staying about this low, someone like Doug Ford is going to say that it's over. Like, that Doug Ford's, like, he would love to be the guy to do that. Are you kidding me? Like, imagine the timing of this. Imagine being the premier of Ontario, who is one of the worst premiers maybe in the history of the nation. But right as you're about to go into an election season, right when you're going into an election season, you're the guy that gets to stand up and say the pandemic is over, right? That's going to be a good look for Ford, man. That's going to be a good look for Ford. He's going to gain about 10% just because of that. People are going to think favorably of the premier if he is the guy that gets to stand up and say credibly, the pandemic is over and we can get on with our lives, right? And what's dangerous about that, of course, is that then gullible rubes will vote for him, and then he'll just sell them out to the capitalist death cult. And we'll all get put back to work along with the disabled and the autistic, right? Like, that's Doug Ford all the way. But the good news to take out of this from a health and safety perspective, looks like these cases are getting under control. Looks like things are actually starting to plane out and plateau. Let's cross those fingers and hope there wasn't some other variant or some other thing that comes along and just sidesteps the whole thing. That's okay. Ford will screw up something else before the election. Yeah, for sure. I'm with you on this, Alex. I'm still wearing my mask after it's over. My feeling is, like, I haven't been sick. Right? I haven't been sick once since this pandemic started, and I usually got sick about 3 times a year, right? 3 times is about how, anytime anything came through, I would get sick. But since we've been doing the mask and since we've been doing all the social distancing stuff and all this, I haven't been sick once. And so I think I'm with you. I think I'm still going to wear the mask. I mean, I just think, and what this pandemic has really done for me, it's really made me think more clearly about, like, yeah, like, we're, like, literally just, like, walking out into the public, surrounding ourselves with strangers, like, and we see how stupid these people are, right? Like, we see how stupid we are now. So, like, yeah, I'll be wearing my mask. Like, I'll be wearing my mask. There's all these stupid people around me being a bunch of dumb idiots. Like, yeah, I will happily wear that mask. Neither have I. It's the extras. Yeah, and, like, now I've got some, like, hand sanitizer around, right, in my bag. I don't really use it that often, but, you know, on the off occasion where I kind of feel like, you know, maybe I should, like, use some hand sanitizer. And I feel like people are more inclined to, like, wash their hands. They're more aware of things. They're more doing this kind of stuff. So, like, I feel like there's a lot of, as I scratch my nose with the back of my hand, yeah, gross. Ugh. So, some good news coming along with COVID. Hopefully that trend continues. Will work for food. Hilarious, right? Hilarious. He's literally working for food. Jokes are fun. So let's dive into some lighthearted Canada's Nazi monuments. The reason why I'm on this is there seems to be an uptick and an upswell. I've got quite a few articles here that are all about Chrystia Freeland, right? Chrystia Freeland's role dealing with connecting with Ukrainian Nazi groups, right? And the concerns that are coming up about this, how Canada has several Nazi monuments, right? Like, literally we have Nazi monuments. that have been erected around. You can find them. You can see them. I think we should tear them down, obviously, because Nazis shouldn't be celebrated and Nazis don't have rights. And what's concerning about someone like Chrystia Freeland is that not only is her grandfather a Nazi collaborator, right? He was a journalist working for the Nazis, propagating Nazi propaganda throughout World War II. And like, the liberal talking point on this, and I think it is fair to say this, is that, well, you can't condemn Chrystia Freeland for something that her grandfather did, right? And I think that that's like, yeah, like that's a reasonable position to take. Here's where it gets kind of sketchy. So Chrystia Freeland, when pressed on this, denied it initially, right? And she doesn't talk about her Nazi grandfather, right? Or the Nazi collaborating grandfather that she had, for obvious reasons, like why would she want to? But it most importantly to me is the denial, right? That like as if we weren't going to find this out, and instead of like trying to get ahead of it, and instead of telling the truth about it, right? Instead of saying like, yes, my grandfather did do that. It was deeply unfortunate. I don't approve of that kind of thing. But I can't control, you can't control where you come from, and we're all working as politicians in order to do better, right? Like that's obviously the talking point, right? Like if I'm Chrystia Freeland's like assistant or right-hand man or PR person, I'm literally saying like, yeah, when someone asks you about your Nazi grandfather, who incidentally, you have a Nazi grandfather, right? Just say, yes, I do have a grandfather who was a Nazi sympathizer. There was absolutely nothing I could do about that. And I feel like knowing that and learning that drives me to do better and improve as a Canadian citizen. There's your talk about it, and you never need to say anything else. And if that's what Chrystia Freeland had said, I think people would have just shut their fucking mouth up about it. No one would have cared, right? But because she's denied it, because she refuses to talk about it, right? That raises questions. And then it gets a little bit weirder once you begin to see that Chrystia Freeland herself, right, has worked in Ukraine with Ukrainian, who was it? It was with Ukrainian groups, right? And while also being part of the party who has had the military train Ukrainian neo-nationals and Nazis, right? She's the foreign minister, right? She's the foreign minister. Like, she knows where these weapons are going. She knows who's getting a hold of it. She knows who's getting trained, right? So here you have the granddaughter of a Nazi collaborator denying that her grandfather is a Nazi collaborator, while simultaneously working with Ukrainian neo-Nazi groups, training them through our military, and also selling them weapons, right? And it's not like she's doing that on the side, right? Throughout the Cold War period, Freeland's maternal grandfather had been a journalist, right? After his death, professor, in 2017, when the Russia-affiliated websites further publicized his connection to Nazism, Freeland and her spokesperson responded by claiming this was a Russian disinformation campaign, right? Her office later denied he ever collaborated with Nazi Germany. However, Freeland has known of her grandfather's Nazi ties since at least '96, when she helped edit a scholarly article. So there it is, black and white, that she knows. And then here's a great article from the Canada Files, right, talking about Chrystia Freeland in Ukraine. How long is this thing? I'm just straight up. I think this is important, like, because it is a fuzzy issue. Like, there's some fuzziness here. So let's. And I think there's some great journalism that's come out of the Canada Files. So I'm actually going to read this aloud. For progressives, foreign policy is one of the most difficult tasks of government to put ideals into action. Some decisions are relatively easy, like expanding intake of refugees from climate disasters, wars, or oppressive governments, or pressuring our allies to adopt better labor practices or workers' rights. But no one can leave the great game of geopolitics unsoiled from the filth of compromise with some form of brutality. Worse, Geopolitics is not a field from which a country and its leadership can opt out. As long as some play aggressive geopolitics, everyone else must stay on the chessboard to prevent our people from being hurt by hostile actors or states by aggressively nationalist and imperialist political movements. One such brutal battlefield of today's great games is Ukraine. There, Canada, and particularly one of Canada's central leaders, Chrystia Freeland, has embraced the mud and blood of geopolitical empire building and war. As foreign minister, our current deputy prime minister has sullied herself and Canada with her support for violent, radical, racist national movements in Ukraine. These are the foreign policy shenanigans into which Canada and our state's foreign policy had to step. The Canadian government's alliance with the European Union and other democratic states and parties in Europe, as well as previous support for ending autocracy in the former USSR, meant that we were obligated to take some stand on the war in Ukraine. The Liberal government extended the same military training, funding, and weapons sales program that Harper began, and as foreign minister, Freeland was in charge of maintaining that relationship. But there is also a personal element in Freeland's own upbringing that makes Ukraine important to her. She is the child of a Ukrainian immigrant. This writer is very familiar with the sentiments that attach the child of an immigrant to the country of their heritage. Both of us have a set of grandparents who migrated with their young children from homelands left destitute after the Second World War. Toddler Helenka Chomayak left war-ravaged Eastern Europe with her parents for Edmonton, and a few years later, a boy named Michael Riggio left the poverty of southern Italy with his parents for similar opportunities in Montreal. Just as I grew up knowing the geography and culture of Calabria, Chrystia Freeland would have known the same of Lviv. Freeland's mother, Chomayak, spent her life as an activist for Ukrainian democracy, working with Western Canada's Ukrainian community, and would have influenced her daughter similarly. Before her political career began, Freeland may very well have looked upon the rise of Ukraine's billionaire kleptocrat, Viktor Yanukovych, with the same disdain that I have for Italy's billionaire sex criminal and recurring prime minister, Silvio Berlusconi, or for the leader of the racist neo-fascist League Party, Matteo Salvini. Our personal connection to, respectively, Ukraine and Italy express itself in the contempt for those who would rule the lands of our heritage with violence and oppression. But the tools of state geopolitics, military support, weapons sales, cyber warfare, espionage, disinformation, trade and financial sanctions, and so on, are themselves methods of oppression. When those tools are at your disposal, it requires the most self-discipline to control how these are used. What betrays Freeland's apparent lack of self-discipline is how her use of geopolitical tools to fight the Russian military and Russian allied militias in Ukraine boosted ultra-nationalist militias whose goals include cleansing and erasure of ethnic minorities from Ukraine. Ukraine has not been a very fortunate country over the last 100 years or so. Ukrainians organized armed resistance to Russian rule in the early days of Stalin's government, support for which grew as Soviet policy, emptied Ukraine of food, an intentional famine that killed more than 10 million people, now known as the Holodomor. Only 5 countries. I do have to stop the article right here, because when I read this, I saw this. There are only 5 nations in the world that acknowledge that that's the truth. Right? I'm surprised to see this in a Canada Files article, honestly, but it is like a common thing that gets spoken about. There's not really any evidence to show that Stalin intentionally did this famine, that there was a famine that occurred there, and in fact the evidence seems to suggest the opposite, that once they realized there was a famine, they started sending food into the region. So I'm surprised to see this come through, but at the same time, it's one of those things, the lie is big and it's difficult to come down from, right? This was Stalin's most brutal attempt to subjugate Ukraine to rule from Moscow using the tools of genocide. I mean, kind of odd considering that Ukraine at the time was already part of the Soviet Union, right? Why would he need to subjugate something he already had? The Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists formed in response to Stalin's state terror, but shared with the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists formed in response to Stalin's state terror? How about the Nazis, dude? How about the Nazis? They're literal Nazis in the conversation. But okay. The OUN's extreme ethnic nationalist ideology held that Russian-speaking people and Jews had no place in Ukrainian society. Oh, sound familiar? Sound familiar? Oh, sounds familiar to me. The OUN was also openly fascist. Their leader's official position was Voigt's warlord or absolute military rule. With their goal of liberation, have a good one, Alex, from Russia and an ideology of ethnic purity and violent anti-Semitism, the OUN under Stepan Bandera in the 1940s were enthusiastic partners of the Nazi invasion. Bandera declared independence after helping the Nazi army push the Soviet army out of Ukraine, establishing the new state's capital in the OUN heartland, Lviv. Bandera stands for an independent Ukraine rather than integration into Germany's European empire, landed him in a Nazi prison cell for years. As the USSR took full control over Ukraine from the end of the Second World War, the OUN was forced into exile, and because of their anti-communism, found a home in the Ukrainian diaspora of Western Europe and North America. The Canadian government throughout the 1950s and 1960s encouraged OUN members and affiliates to immigrate. So literally, we took Nazis in. The policy's purpose was to delude the tendency to left-wing political organization in the Ukrainian Canadian community. So bring in a bunch of fascists and Nazis so that the Ukrainians can't organize on the left. Chrystia Freeland's mother, Halina Chomaik, was one of these social activists, a union organizer and NDP candidate for a federal seat in Edmonton in 1988. Chomaik came in second. Many other Ukrainians who arrived in the same era as Chomaik were far from progressive, including young men who were employed as violent enforcers against labor unions in the natural resources sectors. Those same nationalist Ukrainians who fled the post-Stalin USSR include those who erected a monument to the Ukrainian branch of the Waffen-SS who fought Stalin. These soldiers carried out multiple massacres of Jews, Russian speakers, Roma, and other ethnic minorities throughout the German invasion. The memorial stands proudly, if controversially, in Oakville, Ontario, in the city's St. Volodymyr Ukrainian Cemetery. So literally, a Nazi memorial in Oakville, Ontario. Just a heads up to anybody who might be in Oakville or anybody who thinks that having Nazi memorials standing on Canadian soil is a bad idea. Just a heads up that the geopolitics of the West is always and entirely oriented against fascism is, as we progressively... that the geopolitics of the West is always and entirely oriented against fascism is, as we progressives generally know, a lie. Progressive luminaries like Hannah Arendt, for example, championed the United States as a beacon of democracy after its defeat of Nazi Germany. But it was still a society built on racist segregation and remains so today. Also, the Nazis used a lot of the American genocidal policies in order to enact the Holocaust. That the United States was an inspiration for the Nazis. Throughout the Cold War and War on Terror, successive U.S. governments have given substantial material aid to fascist and authoritarian militants and leaders around the world, as long as they stood up to Russian influence, and in this century, as long as they suppressed Islamist militancy, or were good at pretending so. Likewise, Canada is a country that today can pride itself on having avoided, for now, the authoritarian backslide of so many of our ostensible geopolitical allies, like the United States, Britain, Hungary, and Poland. But racism remains baked into much of what Canada's institutions and cultures, especially our genocidal attitudes and state policies towards our Indigenous populations. As such, for a Canadian politician to take the lead in defense of democratic allies under assault requires a healthy dose of cognitive dissonance, if not willful blindness. Chrystia Freeland's enthusiastic support of any Ukrainian militant group opposed to the Russian invasion required blindness along many such vectors. It was Freeland who coordinated millions of dollars in arms sales from Canadian weapon plants not only to Ukrainians' government, but also Ukrainian nationalist militias. Those militias include the Azov Battalion, Dnipro Battalion, Donbass Battalion, and Adar Battalion, each of which who has been credibly documented as carrying out massacres of Russian-speaking and Jewish Ukrainian civilians. Under Freeland's watch, Canadian military officers also trained the Azov Battalion in guerrilla combat. One officer in charge of training the ethnic nationalist militia was Major Oksana Kuzinich, who is also an influential member of the lobby group, the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. Since the 2019 election of President Volodymyr Zelensky, the militants who Freeland was happy to arm heavily as foreign minister have begun turning against the Ukrainian government. Azov Battalion members carried out a genuine pogrom against Roma Ukrainians in the capital, Kiev, burning their homes to the ground, murdering men and boys, and sexually assaulting women and girls. Their reasoning for doing so was that the city police refused to massacre the Roma themselves. Not only that, but the militiamen that Freeland happily armed with Canadian guns and combat knowledge to fight the Russian invaders have been threatening Zelensky himself. Not only is Zelensky the first Jewish Ukrainian president of the country, the center of his election platform last year was brokering peace with Russia and ending the war in Donetsk and Luhansk. Petro Poroshenko, the former president who Zelensky defeated, aggressively prosecuted the war against Russian invaders and insurgents, has bent his messaging to appeal to nationalist militias. Poroshenko has also leaned into anti-Semitic racism, branding Zelensky as the puppet of Jewish billionaires. The racist militant groups of Ukrainian nationalism are allies of convenience. As long as Russian troops occupy Donetsk and I've got to figure out this word, Luhansk, and as long as militant guerrillas fight the Ukrainian government to bring the country into Russia's sphere of influence. Canadian leaders are right to support a democratic Ukraine, but the militants that our government arms to bolster Ukraine's alliance with Europe's democracies are not themselves Democrats, but the violent vanguard of an ideology of fascism, total war, and ethnic cleansing. Stepan Bandera's ethnic nationalist party, the OUN, still exists today under another name. Svoboda, formerly the Social Nationalist Party of Ukraine, whose ideology openly is and always was that kind of national socialism. A fairly minor party, their activists played a noticeable role in the Maidan Uprising of 2014, as the only protesters openly committing violence against police forces and Party of Regions offices. Svoboda officials and leaders have deep connections with violent guerrilla groups like Azov's Battalion, who have massacred ethnic minorities throughout the Russian invasion. That Chrystia Freeland, as the foreign minister of one of the world's more resilient liberal democracies, sold arms and sent Canadian soldiers to train neo-Nazi groups in the name of holding back Russian military aggression, is a serious fault. Her own identity as the child of a Catholic Ukrainian immigrant includes a weakness that has made her enthusiastic support for the nationalist battalions more likely than not. Freeland's heritage is the same as Bandera's and his successors in Ukrainian fascism. The city of Lviv, cultural center of the most European, least Russian-influenced region of Ukraine. The cosmopolitan Lviv produced both the fascist guerrilla leaders Bandera and the Social Democratic Union organizer Halina Chemaik. Raised in the relative haven of Peace River and Edmonton in Alberta, Freeland would likely have had a romanticized, idealized picture of Ukrainian liberation. As a member of the comfortable classes, she would not have understood that you can oppose an imperialist invasion of your country while also being a fascist. As a result, Canadian weapons likely helped slaughter and rape hundreds of Roma in the name of an ethnically pure Ukraine, among who yet knows how many other crimes of humanity. Geopolitics is the greatest and highest stakes political power, where the creation and destruction of whole peoples are at issue. To use this power for democratic ideals is the greatest temptation of state leadership. Yet it is also the field of politics' most grotesque compromises, as when the soldiers of democratic countries arm and train fascist militants to secure a fragile, allied democratic state against a different enemy. The romantic view of Ukraine, she is clouds the judgment of the former Canadian foreign minister. In the dangerous field of geopolitics, one must often treat the enemy of my enemy as my friend, but all the more frequently, the enemy of my enemy is also my enemy. That's a powerful article right there, and gives a real picture. And I actually think it's kind of nice to Chrystia Freeland, right? Like this idea that she has this romanticized view that the Ukrainians are working for their own independence and we are going to help them, and then they'll carry forward as like normal people would, right? When in reality, she's outright working with neo-fascist and neo-Nazi organizations. Like, it's a very scary moment to realize that the future leader of the Liberal Party here in Canada, Canada's natural ruling party, has significant ties to Nazi collaboration and Nazi groups. Like, these are not insignificant ties. So it's very, very, it's deeply unsettling to me that this is occurring here in Canada. Hey, Onward, how you doing, bud? Feel like I haven't seen you in like 2 weeks. Oh my goodness. Oh, little pug. Milo, go get it. Go get it. Good boy. Good boy. Oh. So, Chrystia Freeland, as we move forward, I think my favorite part about Chrystia Freeland's ascension to power is how much the media is going to completely ignore this. This is why I feel like I need to talk about it regularly, right? And why I need to constantly bring it up that, like, hey, have you noticed that Chrystia Freeland has pretty significant ties to Nazi organizations? Like, yeah, sure, we can help you make as much Ukraine democracy as you want, but we're going to have to do an ethnic cleansing in advance, right? Oh, we want everybody to have a voice in our democracy, except the Russians and the Jews, right? Like, no. Yeah, no one apologizes for anything anymore. They just embrace it, right? Like, that's kind of what Trump showed, that you can be a very successful politician just while wagging your dick out. And, like, even the moments that you think would be easy to apologize, like the grab her by the pussy comment, right? Like, Donald Trump was just like, yeah, just go up and grab her by the pussy, right? And then somebody, like, put a mic in his face and was just like, hey, man, that's, like, a pretty rough comment. And he was just like, it's just locker talk. Right? And that was it. That whole conversation just instantly died. Instantly. He didn't apologize for it. He didn't show a single sign of remorse. He just shrugged and went like, yeah, it's just locker talk. And a bunch of fucking like white supremacist bros were just like, yeah, locker talk. Right? They liked that. It actually was something they enjoyed. And so a lot of politicians are starting to realize like, oh yeah, like the people we rule over are actually kind of scumbags. Right? Like, if you're someone like Doug Ford realizes that a lot of the people in his constituents are just fucking scumbags. Like, he knows. How do we know he knows? Because he sells drugs to them. Right? That's how he knows. Like, he knows who these people are. He knows who his constituents are. And he knows that they're scumbags. So, like, why tell the truth? Why bother, right? He's literally just got to be like, buck a beer, and that's it. And they're like, oh, buck a beer, I love it. I love it. What a great idea Doug had. Hey, did you hear about Doug Ford's idea? Buck a beer, right? Oh, you're feeling scrappy today, eh, buddy? My little pug, I'm like petting with my foot, and he's trying to fight my foot. Yeah, fight the foot. Fight the power. Fight the Foot Clan. I remember the commentaries on CNN after Charlottesville said, we just saw a man self-immolate. Yeah, they don't understand. They don't understand how far we've fallen. Yeah. Well, and also, like, CNN has positioned itself, right? Like, I was talking earlier about this. The news and the political structure, like, it's all owned by the same people, right? They're just presenting us it's all just WWE entertainment, right? Hey Chris, how you doing, bud? As an Indigenous Canadian, I can't tell you how afraid I am of Canada and America becoming more fascist and racist. It's a nightmare. Yeah, dude. Yeah, like why, Chris? Is there some kind of dark history that neo-colonial fascists have inflicted upon minority groups here in Canada? Like, in all seriousness, like, I am deeply concerned about somebody like Chrystia Freeland coming to the top, because, like, all of the great villains of history believe that they're doing the right thing, right? Nobody believes that they're the villain. Everybody thinks that they're on the side of righteousness, right? And this includes, like, some of the darkest figures, right? Like, Adolf Hitler believed that he was doing what was right. Like, he believed that he was doing righteousness. He didn't see himself as a villain, right? And this, it's the externalization of evil, right? That I am morally pure and you are evil, that gets lots of people in lots of trouble. And more I see that from a figure like Chrystia Freeland, that she genuinely does believe she's doing good while selling weapons and training literal neo-Nazi groups. Because, oh yeah, neo-Nazi groups, sure they're neo-Nazi groups, but they're fighting against the commies, right? Because that's something that we got to do. And these days it's not even commies. It's literally just like the Russians, right? As the U.S. arms itself on the Russian border, like so it's this old kind of Cold War view that Freeland is carrying through, and really, like, it's well, if that happens, imagine how much worse it will be here. Like I hope that this message sort of pierces through, that, like, I don't trust these liberals at all. Like, I feel like I'm looking at, like, a far right party, right? Like, that, sure, you could create a narrative that says Freeland sort of is unwittingly or is well meant or any of that kind of stuff, if you like. It doesn't change the fact that she's doing it. Doesn't change the fact that she's positioned herself to become the leader of the party. And if that's the case, like, that makes the Liberal Party a fairly far right party, right? Like, they're not going to pass anything to benefit the populace. They're not going to pass anything to actually, and anything they have had to pass throughout this pandemic period, they're swiftly working to dismantle. So, like, by what reasonable, like, by what rational position am I supposed to actually put my support behind somebody like Freeland, right? And, like, especially as these conservatives are beginning to realize, oh, we can just lie. Oh, wow, we can just lie, right? That we can gain huge support in the populace if we just tell enormous lies. And so you have this, like, conservative party that seems to be moving more to the left, while you have a liberal party that seems to be declining into the right. And at what point do we say, like, oh, like, what's the difference? Like, what's the difference here? Like, just the platitudes that they tell seem to be different. Yeah, liberals are proof. You can't ally with capital and maintain any ethical integrity. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That even if they went into the conversation meaning well, right? Even if they believed themselves to be doing what was right and what was good for the populace, capitalism will not allow that to happen. It can't allow it to happen. It structurally won't happen. I think libs here are starting to see what's coming after 4 years of ineffectual neoliberalism. Well, I mean, like, the Obama years were the total case in point. Like, Obama got into power, right, with an enormous upswell of hope and change, right? Like, there was this enormous, huge voter turnout. People were really galvanized. He was, like, celebrated for the campaign he ran, right? Really, really ran a strong campaign. And this is back when, like, all the millennials were still, like, that's over 12 years ago, right? Like, so we're all still in our early 20s, right? We're still figuring things out in the world, and we see this guy, Obama, come in. He seems so well-spoken and a black man in a racially fractured America, all this kind of stuff. And he comes into power, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, yes, he's going to do things." Not only did they have the presidency, they had the Senate, and they had the Congress. He squandered all of that. He didn't pass any agenda whatsoever. He became a defender of Wall Street. He totally protected the status quo in every single way. Expanded the war effort, like in every single metric that absolutely matters. Obama was a complete and total failure. He ended up being a right winger. He ended up being like a Nixon style Republican more than anything. And this creates such an enormous amount of disillusionment in the populace that they fucking turn and vote a Donald Trump, right? Like that's a huge amount of disillusionment. Like that's an enormous disillusionment to realize like that we were grifted by Obama, that Obama's grift, like Obama was smooth, man. Obama was smooth. Like the reason why we make fun of Donald Trump is because his lies are obvious. They're clumsy and childish, right? Obama's lies were smooth as butter, man. They were smooth as silk. And that seems to be the big complaint that's coming out of America. If I'm going to be lied to, I'm going to be lied to by somebody who makes me feel good about it. That's really seems to be the difference. That they're like, I don't like that Donald Trump because when he lies, I feel it. I feel bad. It makes me feel bad and kind of cringy a little bit. When I get lied to by a politician, I want it to rub my earlobes. I want it to like creamy butter, right? Just fucking ridiculous. Yeah, they won't say it out loud and breathe life into their worst nightmares, but they know. Well, I mean, for God's sakes, like, what's going to come after the Biden administration, right? Like, the next run-up is probably going to be Biden versus Trump again. I do suspect that Trump will lose. I think that Trump will lose. But whoever comes after Donald Trump is going to be like a full-scale nightmare creature. Like, full scale. Like, think about a person who's politically savvy enough to galvanize this Q movement, to galvanize those people in the Republican movement, right, for their own purpose and their own cause. And again, it's always worth pointing out, Donald Trump has no ambition beyond to be the prime minister, be the president. That's all he wants. He just wants to be the president. He doesn't care to really do anything with that power. He just wants to have that power. That's it. And so that he can like put on a business card, former president, right? President Donald Trump. Like, that's it. So imagine somebody who does have some ambitions, who has a vision on the world stage. And there are people in the Republican Party that definitely have that, right? Even someone like Mike Pence. Like, Mike Pence has a vision for the world stage. It's to eradicate the Muslim population in a righteous crusade, right? How do I know? He said so. Like, it's like the fascist Christians that exist in the Republican Party are as terrifying, if not more terrifying, than the Nazis ever were. So there's some real dark shit coming in America, dude. It's going to happen sooner than we'd like. Exactly, even if meaning well, here U.S. people are watching AOC become the next Nancy Pelosi, excusing on austerity and compromise. Exactly. Because AOC is just a character, right? This whole thing that she's doing where she seized sort of the socialist movement that Bernie Sanders revealed, right? So she's just turned into a caricature of that, where that's just how she gets support, right? And the Democrats let her say that because she doesn't act against them. Hey, Lonnie, how you doing? Hey, Loaf, how you doing? Yeah, silly commie. If fascist ideas were so bad, the free market wouldn't like them so much. Well, the problem is that violence is always appealing, right? We love violence as a people. Like, violence it's built into us. And so if somebody comes up and stands up and says, hey, we should do violence, there's a little part of basically everybody that's like, violence, eh? Maybe violence is the solution. And that to me is the core of what it is to be a fascist. That if you are like, this is why I say, like, I've got no problem with people like locking up Nazis and stuff. It's like, because to be a Nazi the first thing you have to say is, I want to destroy a minority group. Like, which is why when you end up talking to Nazis and fascists, the only question and the only conversation you ever should engage with these guys is, which minority group are you trying to destroy and why? That's it. That's the only conversation to have with these guys. And because any other conversation they're going to have is specifically to obfuscate this central point, that they want to destroy some minority group. They could just team up. The CLPC, Conservative Liberal Party of Canada. Oh yeah, wouldn't that be the thing, right? But the thing is that they can't, and they know they can't, because should such a thing occur, the populace would abandon it. Like, they can't make it so on the nose, right? That they've got to actually pretend as though there's an opposition movement. They've got to actually pretend as though that the two major parties aren't actually allies, right? Like, you can't mess with that narrative on that kind of level. Like, if Macho Man goes out there and fights Andre the Giant, he can't also work against the interests of Hulk Hogan, right? Like, the lines need to be clear and they need to be drawn. And if Macho Man does start to work against Hulk Hogan, then that means he is working with Andre the Giant. And the audience knows that intrinsically, by the way. Like, those twists happen in WWE narratives, right? They happen where, like, Hulk Hogan suddenly becomes the villain. But, like, there's, like, a momentary confusion, and then there's the reveal that it's the case. And then you move forward, and Hulk Hogan is understood to be the villain now. But you can't waffle. You can't waffle. Like, you can't do both sides like that. It doesn't work. Uncle Sniffy is no Obama. Uncle Sniffy? Oh, are you talking about Biden? Yeah, Biden is basically just nostalgia porn at this point, right? Like, he's just like a comfortable little delusional sweater for Americans to wrap themselves in and pretend as though, like, Uncle Obama or Uncle Biden will make everything seem like it was back in the past. And that people just do not recognize that the Democrats and the Biden administration are seeding the soil for a major, major fascist movement in America. Like, and it's gonna be absolute. It's gonna be big. It's gonna be big. Like, think about how many Nazi movements and how much fascism occurred under Trump, and recognize that those movements were really just beginning, right? They were just starting to coalesce, and they were just starting to get together, and they were just starting to reintegrate and repopularize and get out into the streets. And since then, they've just been building, right? Since then, they've just been building, and under Biden, they're like cooling their heels, right? They're dealing with the fallout from the January 6th insurrection, all of that kind of stuff. But, like, they're still militant and they're still out there. They're not widely reported on because, as we know, the media works with the political apparatus in order to maintain these things and to silence these things. And so the disillusionment that the Biden administration is creating, and it's enormous. Like, Biden hasn't done a goddamn thing. Like, not one thing. And there's a million things that he could do. There's a million things that he could do, and he's not doing any of them. And then on top of that, like, ICE detention has gone up 70% under Biden. The recruitment budget for military and police services was doubled under Biden. Like, there are major, 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 major concern moments where you're just like, wait, how is Biden actually different than Trump, right? And when you actually break it down by policy, you see pretty clearly he wasn't, and he isn't. And I get very concerned that at the same moment where there is a rising fascist movement occurring in the United States coming up from the Republican Party, that at the same moment that's happening, we are going to have a granddaughter of a literal Nazi collaborator who has sold weapons and trained Nazi militias in Ukraine be the leader of the natural ruling party of Canada. It's very, 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 very concerning to me. It's very concerning to me that this is the conversation that we are finding ourselves in. And you just know that the liberals are going to double down on the, like, vote for women, feminism angle, like that whole thing. And just funnel everything into straight up gender politics. Do not have a class conversation. Do not have a conversation about how we're terrible neighbors, right? Do not have a conversation about foreign policies, right? Any of that kind of stuff. Don't talk about the hardships that people are going through. Try to make it all about gender and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully the populace is exhausted with that and won't go along with it, right? Hopefully. But because it's just kind of cringy and embarrassing to me at this point. Like you're genuinely telling me that we're going to be 40-year-olds, like the millennials are going to be 40, and we're still going to be voting along lines of just like, well, she's a woman. It's women power now, right? And we're literally not going to take a look and ask like, hey, is she a fucking Nazi, right? Is she a grifter, right? Like we're not going to be adults about this at all. Like we're not going to have an adult conversation about this at all. We're literally just going to be like, yeah, women power. Really? Like fuck. But at this stage in the game, none of that is going to surprise me. Like I said earlier, right? The pandemic has really revealed that there are enormous sections of the populace, way more than I thought, that is just like dirt, nail in the head, like absolutely. I cannot see the difference between reality and the delusions that exist in my own mindscape. Like there's an enormous section of the populace that's like this. Like literally people walking around saying that COVID doesn't exist. Like yikes. Big yikes. And like way more people are like that than I thought. And it's actually in a funny way made it a lot easier to do this channel, because now anytime I have conversations like online or any of this kind of stuff, I immediately am just like, I'm probably talking to like a COVID denier. Like I'm probably talking to somebody who's just got like a nail in their forehead, right? Like, and so it makes it so much easier to just like walk away from conversations, to just be like, okay, bud, and like leave. Because like, you're not going to prove anything to these guys. They've got a nail in their head, right? You're not going to prove anything to these guys. They're denying reality right in front of them. And there's just like, it's at least 30%. It's at least 30% of the populace that is walking around with like a nail in their head. I am this stupid. I think Trump will win because people won't care enough to vote, and voter suppression. And he only lost because of COVID. But who knows? Yeah, that's true. And while the Democrats liked to pump up that Biden won by big numbers and all that kind of stuff, that's not actually true. Like very thin margins are how these political arrangements are won by, right? It's very, very thin margins. Like and the Trump crowd is really showing like they are determined. And just as you say, right? Like, if the Trumpers come out and they're just as determined and they have the same numbers, and the Biden people or the Democratic people are just not coming out, right? We'll see though, because they could successfully just straight out, like they've pegged Trump as a fascist, and they've pegged the Republicans as a fascist movement, and that might be enough. It might be enough to work along those lines. But all that means is that, like, after another 4 years of Biden, right, the populace is going to be angry and disgruntled because Biden will have done nothing to ameliorate their suffering, and in fact, things will have gotten worse for a lot of Americans. And the Republicans are going to put up somebody who isn't Trump, but who has all of the political savviness of an actual politician who is a fascist, right? It's going to be a disaster. It's going to be a big disaster. Trying to get millennials and Gen Z to vote for the system as it is a losing proposition. Well, and especially in America, more and more people just understand, like, it doesn't actually matter. It's not actually changing their life, right? Like, that's what's so dangerous about what the Biden administration is doing. They're not actually changing anybody's life, right? That everyone's life has gotten worse. It's very obvious that this is the case. And they're not doing anything to actually make anybody's life better. And to me, the only, like, what needs to happen, and I say it all the time, so you guys know exactly what I'm about to say. You've got to surround the halls of power. There's nothing left to do. The Republicans and the Democrats are allies. They work together. They work in tandem. They are not adversaries, right? These are just talking points. Like it's so we gotta. But there's like a real grow up moment that needs to happen, especially amongst millennials. Like millennials are getting older and they're just starting to tune in now to politics because they're starting to realize that, oh, this thing actually matters, right? And oh, we can be lied to and grifted. And people are coming in and they're talking about it as if it's something that it isn't, which is a political system. It's not a political system. It's an entertainment system more than anything. It's interesting how little traction Laughing Kamala has gotten. She's cringe. Yeah, they're doing a good job of not reporting on Kamala. Like Kamala's a cop, right? Like she's a prosecutor. Didn't Mussolini's granddaughter just win in Rome? Did she? That'd be crazy, dude. Like literally, they hung Mussolini. Like I'd be blown away. Mussolini's daughter wins in Rome. No kidding. Second term, no less. Mussolini's granddaughter wins second term in Rome municipal vote. Wow. Said her success was down to her hard work, not to her family history. Won more than 8,200 votes, more than any other candidate, and far more than the 650 votes she received on the previous ballot. Wow, okay. Maybe it's possible that she's just like totally embraced the fact that like asked for her views on fascism. She says she's against its glorification, but declined further comment saying to deal with the subject we need to talk until tomorrow morning. Well, I mean, I am a believer in the idea that someone can be like, yeah, my grandfather or even my father was like this. I don't agree with that, and I'm going to prove it to you, right? I am sort of on board with that idea, and I was on board with that with Chrystia Freeland. Like, I was on board with that with Chrystia Freeland, right? Until I realized she's selling weapons to these guys. Like, actions speak louder than words, right? So if she's walking around denying ties to her, like denying her Nazi collaborating grandfather in the first place, and then simultaneously selling weapons to Nazis. But I don't know anything about Mussolini's granddaughter. I don't know anything about the situation, so I'm not going to comment on it. For all I know, she's a lovely young lady who looks at her grandfather and goes like, yeah, that was not good for Italy, and I don't want to repeat that. And if anything, I'm going to learn from the mistakes my grandfather made and try to improve the country of Italy. Like, that's how I'd be talking. Like, if I found out my grandfather was a fucking Nazi collaborator, I 100% would be walking around saying, like, I am learning from the mistakes my grandfather made in order to avoid them and to be a better leader for the people of Canada. That's exactly the shit that I would say. If I was Chrystia Freeland, that's exactly what she should be saying. But it doesn't matter, because the media isn't actually going to talk to her about this. Like, the media is not actually going to talk to her about this, right? It's going to be fucking guys like me, off in the fringes, off in the corner, being like, hey, anybody noticing she's fucking working with Nazis? And people will be like, oh, whatever, just more commie shit. Like, forget about the fact that I'm right. Like, forget about the fact that I'm right. Like, who cares about that anymore? Who cares about the truth? You guys see the Beaverton article, anti-vax family thankful they'll have more leftovers this year? Straight savage. Well, yeah, the Beaverton's on point, dude. I think that they have gotten to where I am at, where they just realize, like, oh, these guys are fucking morons. Like, we're fucking morons. There's no reason to be nice to these guys anymore. I doubt Democrats will hold the House in the midterms. Yeah, I think you're on to something, Gunk. We'll see. It's been there just shocking in action, right? Like, and it's been shocking. Yeah, I can't believe that people think dewormer is safer than vaccines. Yeah, dude, like, that's stupid, right? Like, that's fucking, like, it's snake oil salesmanship. Like, we elected, you ever watch one of these TV shows where, like, you've got the protagonists and all this kind of stuff, and then somebody comes on and they're literally like, Uncle Sam's fresh brown snake oil juice. It'll cure anything that ails ya. Hey there, drink this juice. It'll cure you upright. Right? Like, now imagine that the people in that show elected that person to be the fucking president of the United States of America. That's what they did. They took someone who is like a grifter, who is literally just a snake oil salesman, and they put him into a position of power. And every single day, he went out to the podium and pitched his stupid grifts. Every day, he used that podium as a way to sell snake oil. That's what he did. And that's why the ivermectin thing is as it is. Because he stood in front of the nation and pitched like hydrochloroquine and ivermectin and all this shit. And now, finally, he's out of office and he's walking around saying, yeah, people should take the vaccine. And when he says people should take the vaccine, his own people boo him. So they've lost control of it. And because they've lost control of it, they're just shrugging and going like, well, might as well keep grifting, right? Might as well keep grifting. And people are just buying it. And like, again, I say it, it's becoming like daily. So I don't know how to say this. This is why you don't lie to the populace, because the populace is so full of extraordinary dummies, right? Extraordinary dummies, that when you lie to the populace and create this scenario where they don't believe anything anymore, then they'll fall for stupid, dumb grifts that come out of left field. Like, it's just getting to be like, yikes, man. Like, yikes. If Trump is actually held responsible, he won't be. If I lost. Trump people foaming the mouth with rage. They're going to vote in droves. Libs don't see Trump on Twitter anymore, so they underestimate the anger. Exactly. They underestimate the anger, right? Liberals always underestimate the anger, and it's because liberals are often detached from reality, right? Like, when polled about anger in the populace, liberals are only like about 1% angry. They're like, oh, only about 1% of people who vote liberal say that they're angry. Meanwhile, the rest of the populace is saying like 30% are saying that they're angry. And then you get into the fringes, like the PPC and all this, and like 70% of them are saying that they're angry, right? So, of course, they underestimate the anger because they have no idea what it is. Because they're all just like managers who have tricked themselves into believing that being a manager of a Denny's is the greatest job ever, or being a manager of a Starbucks, or being a manager of some box store, right? Like, oh, this is great. I'm the manager of some box store, so I get to have a little group of toadies that I get to inflict my will upon, and they've got to do what I say. And so I feel like I have respect in this society, and I'm not angry about it because I'm a winner, even though they're the biggest fucking losers that exist in the society completely. They're suffering from Stockholm syndrome, that if they had a moment, even one moment in their lives where they realized how much they've sacrificed for this, how much of their humanity and how much of their time that they have actually sacrificed for this pursuit of capital that won't reward them at all, they would rebel like the rest of us. But they completely underestimate the anger. Clinton did. Clinton absolutely underestimated the anger. And that's probably the reason she lost. If Trump is actually held responsible and sent to prison, DeSantis will be Trump is not going to be held responsible. You can't hold presidents responsible for their actions, because that means that you might hold the next one responsible, right? And so they protect each other, right? The political apparatus protects itself because it doesn't want to actually have responsibility. One of the funniest things that I keep hearing about China, right? Everybody keeps saying, like, China is so authoritarian. And when I, like, crack that open and investigate, like, authoritarian, right, I begin to realize that literally what they mean is China has laws that they follow and adhere to everybody, right? That's authoritarian. So America, on the other hand, has laws, but they don't apply them to anybody, right? That's certainly not the wealthy and certainly not people who have positions of power. So that's not authoritarian, right? It's not authoritarian to allow your leaders to do whatever they want, including committing like mass scale invasions and genocides. That's not authoritarian. That's the free market, right? So so they'll never. Trump is going to die on a deathbed, right? He's going to be surrounded by nurses. Like, he's going to be very, very well taken care of. He is not going to experience like a moment of hubris or any kind of self-awareness or any of that kind of stuff. He's just gonna die in a comfortable bed in a mansion, right? Probably in a skyscraper, no less, right? And the bed will be made of gold and like all that kind of shit. Like that's what's gonna happen to Donald Trump. Like no one's gonna take Donald Trump and put him in prison. He's not even gonna go to trial. Like none of that is gonna happen to Donald Trump. He is 100% like George W. Bush, like Tony Blair, like Donald Rumsfeld, like Dick Cheney, like all these guys. They're going to die in comfortable beds, in mansions, in skyscrapers. That's what's going to happen to these guys. And the only vengeance or justice that we are going to have is the pale hope that maybe one day we'll dismantle these systems that they erected. That's it. That's it. Be gone with this idea that these guys are going to go to jail. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Like, never going to happen. Like, for that to happen, the Americans would need to already have been in the streets, right? Like, we are going to need, like, mass-scale protest movements like the country has never seen in order to get any of these guys to end up in jail. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, if Nixon didn't go to jail, none of them go to jail, right? Like, Nixon was a straight-up dyed-in-the-wool war criminal who had to be pardoned, right? They pardoned him, remember? Like, that's how dedicated the Republicans and the Democrats are to protecting one another. That someone like Nixon got pardoned by the president. Like, that's pretty fucking crazy. Like, that's pretty fucking crazy. Like, Nixon should have gone to jail and was on the path to go to jail, right? Then he just gets pardoned by Carter, right? And so they work together. They're buddies, and it's always been that way. I guess the anti-vax governors are still interviewing for presidency. DeSantis could be the guy. Like, it could be. And DeSantis is actually kind of scary because he knows better. Like, he is just like a grifter. Like, Donald Trump does have a sort of, like, callous stupidity about him. But, like, DeSantis knows better. Daughter of jazz musician Romano Mussolini. Yeah. Mussolini's band toured internationally with artists. What the fuck are you talking about, dude? All right. Democrats offer austerity, platitudes. Trump offers rage, hate, racism, makes you feel your flaws or virtues, makes you feel powerful. That's what I see, yeah. Neither Democrats or Republicans offer anything material, so the choice is pointless. Yes, Dem offers cycles of total panic and then 100% passivity. Yeah. We've got to go to war against these fascists and do nothing. Gunk. Kleptocrats are competing to see how much they can loot and steal while distracting people by whipping up mob justice for scapegoats, i.e. divide and conquer, but with no end goal beyond hoarding wealth. And this is the other part of it. Why this whole conversation is dangerous is that these guys don't really have a plan, right? They don't really have, like, they're not actually looking at the thing and creating a plan. And there's actually a really great document here. I'm going to read this out loud. I know another big one, guys, but I'm going to read this one out loud just so you guys understand where I'm coming from. This is one of the most important documents that I have ever seen to really articulate exactly how badly we are going to get abandoned by the rich. Before we do that, I am going to take a quick break. I don't have a clip. Look at me. I'm so bad at getting the clip. So enjoy your chair stream. Chair stream. It's time to look at a chair. Chair stream. At least it's not thin air. At least it's not thin. At least it's not thin. At least it's not thin air. So you guys know me, right? Like, you guys know me. I constantly call the wealthy in this society sociopathic, right? Like that it's gone sociopathic and psychopathic. And I started talking this way when I found this article. This article was written in 2018, right? From Future Human. Survival of the Richest by Douglas Rushkoff. The wealthy are plotting to leave us behind. Last year, I got invited to a super deluxe private resort to deliver a keynote speech to what I assumed would be 100 or so investment bankers. It was by far the largest fee I had ever been offered for a talk, about half my annual professor's salary, all to deliver some insight on the subject of the future of technology. I've never liked talking about the future. The Q&A sessions always end up being more like parlor games, where I'm asked to opine on the latest technology buzzwords, as if they were ticker symbols for potential investments. Blockchain, 3D printing, CRISPR. The audiences are rarely interested in learning about these technologies or their potential impacts beyond the binary choice of whether or not to invest in them. But money talks, so I took the gig. After I arrived, I was ushered into what I thought was the green room, but instead of being wired with a microphone or taken to a stage, I just sat there at a plain round table as my audience was brought to me. 5 super wealthy guys, yes, all men, from the upper echelon of the hedge fund world. After a bit of small talk, I realized they had no interest in the information I had prepared about the future of technology. They had come with questions of their own. They started out innocuously enough. Ethereum or Bitcoin? Is quantum computing a real thing? Slowly but surely, however, they edged into their real topics of concern. Which region will be less impacted by the coming climate crisis? New Zealand or Alaska? Is Google really building Ray Kurzweil a home for his brain? And will his consciousness live through the transition? Or will it die and be reborn as a whole new one? Finally, the CEO of a brokerage house explained that he had nearly completed building his own underground bunker system and asked, "How do I maintain authority over my security force after the event?" The event. That was their euphemism for the environmental collapse. Social unrest, nuclear explosion, unstoppable virus, or Mr. Robot hack that takes everything down. This single question occupied us for the rest of the hour. They knew armed guards would be required to protect their compounds from the angry mobs. But how would they pay the guards once money was worthless? What would stop the guards from choosing their own leader? The billionaires considered using special combination locks on the food supply that only they knew, or making guards wear disciplinary collars of some kind in return for their survival. Or maybe building robots to serve as guards and workers, if that technology could be developed in time. That's when it hit me. At least, as far as these gentlemen were concerned, this was a talk about the future of technology. Taking their cue from Elon Musk colonizing Mars, Peter Thiel reversing the aging process, or Sam Altman and Ray Kurzweil uploading their minds into supercomputers, they were preparing for a digital future that had a whole lot less to do with making the world a better place than it did with transcending the human condition altogether and insulating themselves from a very real and present danger of climate change. Rising sea levels, mass migrations, global pandemics, nativist panic, and resource depletion. For them, the future of technology is really about just one thing: escape. There's nothing wrong. Hold on one second, guys. Sorry. There's nothing wrong with madly optimistic appraisals of how technology might benefit human society, but the current drive for a post-human utopia is something else. It's less a vision for the wholesale migration of humanity into a new state of being than a quest to transcend all that is human: the body, interdependence, compassion, vulnerability, and complexity, As technology philosophers have been pointing out for years, the transhumanist vision too easily reduces all of reality to data, concluding that humans are nothing but information processing objects. It's a reduction of human evolution to a video game that someone wins by finding the escape hatch and then letting a few of his BFFs come along for the ride. Will it be Musk, Bezos, Thiel, Zuckerberg? These billionaires are the presumptive winners of the digital economy, the same survival of the fittest business landscape that's fueling most of this speculation to begin with. Of course, it wasn't always this way. There was a brief moment in the early 1990s when the digital future felt open-ended and up for our invention. Technology was becoming a playground for the counterculture, who saw it the opportunity to create a more inclusive, distributed, and pro-human future. But established business interests only saw new potentials for the same old extraction, and too many technologists were seduced by unicorn IPOs. Digital futures became understood more like stock futures or cotton futures, something to predict and make bets on. So nearly every speech, article, study, documentary, or white paper was seen as relevant only insofar as it pointed to a ticker symbol. The future became less a thing we create through our present-day choices or hopes for humankind than a predestined scenario we bet on with our venture capital but arrive at passively. This freed everyone from the moral implications of their activities. Technology development became less a story of collective flourishing than personal survival. Worse, as I learned, to call attention to any of this was to unintentionally cast oneself as an enemy of the market or an anti-technology curmudgeon. So, instead of considering the practical ethics of impoverishing and exploiting the many in the name of the few, most academics, journalists, and science fiction writers instead consider much more abstract and fanciful conundrums. Is it fair for a stock trader to use smart drugs? Should children get implants for foreign languages? Do we want autonomous vehicles to prioritize the lives of pedestrians over those of its passengers? Should the first Mars colonies be run as democracies? Does changing my DNA undermine my identity? Should robots have rights? Asking those sorts of questions while philosophically entertaining is a poor substitute for wrestling with the real moral quandaries associated with unbridled technological development in the name of corporate capitalism. Digital platforms have turned an already exploitive and extractive marketplace, think Walmart, into an even more dehumanizing successor, think Amazon. Most of us became aware of these downsides in the form of automated jobs, the gig economy, and the demise of local retail. But the more devastating impacts of pedal-to-the-metal digital capitalism fall on the environment and global poor. The manufacture of some of our computers and smartphones still use networks of slave labor. These practices are so deeply entrenched that a company called Fairphone, founded from the ground up to make and market ethical phones, learned it was impossible. The company's founder now sadly refers to their products as fairer phones. Meanwhile, the mining of rare earth metals and disposal of our highly digital technologies destroy human habitats, replacing them with toxic waste dumps, which are then picked over by peasant children and their families, who sell usable materials back to the manufacturers. This out-of-sight, out-of-mind externalization of poverty and poison doesn't go away just because we've covered our eyes with VR goggles and immersed ourselves in an alternative reality. If anything, the longer we ignore the social, economic, and environmental repercussions, the more of a problem they become. This, in turn, motivates even more withdrawal, more isolationism and apocalyptic fantasy, and more desperately concocted technologies and business plans. The cycle feeds itself. The more committed we are to this view of the world, the more we come to see human beings as the problem and technology as the solution. The very essence of what it means to be a human is treated less as a feature than a bug. No matter their embedded biases, technologies are declared neutral. Any bad behaviors they induce in us are just a reflection of our own corrupted core. It's as if some innate human savagery is to blame for our troubles. Just as the inefficiency of a local taxi market can be solved with an app that bankrupts human drivers, the vexing inconsistencies of the human psyche can be corrected with a digital or genetic upgrade. Ultimately, according to the techno-solutionist orthodoxy, the human future climaxes by uploading our consciousness to a computer, or perhaps better, accepting that technology itself is our evolutionary successor. Like members of a Gnostic cult, we long to enter the next transient phase of our development, shedding our bodies and leaving them behind, along with our sins and troubles. Our movies and television shows play out these fantasies for us. Zombie shows depict a post-apocalypse where people are no better than the undead and seem to know it. Worse, these shows invite viewers to imagine the future as a zero-sum battle between the remaining humans, where one group's survival is dependent on another one's demise. Even Westworld, based on a science fiction novel where robots run amok, ended its second season with the ultimate reveal. Human beings are simpler and more predictable than the artificial intelligences we create. The robots learn that each of us can be reduced to just a few lines of codes, and that we're inescapable of making any willful choices. Heck, even the robots in that show want to escape the confines of their bodies and spend the rest of their lives in a computer simulation. The mental gymnastics required for such a profound role reversal between humans and machines all depend on the underlying assumption that humans suck. Let's either change them or get away from them forever. Thus, we get tech billionaires launching electric cars into space, as if this symbolizes something more than one billionaire's capacity for corporate promotion. And if a few people do reach escape velocity and somehow survive in a bubble on Mars, despite our inability to maintain such a bubble even here on Earth, in either of two multi-billion-dollar biosphere trials, the result will be less a continuation of the human dysphoria than a lifeboat for the elite. When the hedge fund managers asked me the best way to maintain authority over the security forces after the event, I suggested that their best bet would be to treat those people really well, right now. They should be engaging with their security staffs as if they were members of their own family, and the more they can expand this ethos of inclusivity to the rest of their business practices, supply chain management, sustainability efforts, and wealth distribution, the less chance there will be of an event in the first place. All this technological wizardry could be applied towards less romantic, but entirely more collective interests right now. They were amused by my optimism, but they didn't really buy it. They were not interested in how to avoid a calamity. They were convinced we are too far gone. For all their wealth and power, they don't believe they can affect the future. They are simply accepting the darkest of all scenarios and then bringing whatever money and technology they can employ to insulate themselves, especially if they can get a seat on the rocket to Mars. Luckily, those of us without the funding to consider disowning our own humanity have much better options available to us. We don't have to use technology in such antisocial, atomizing ways. We can become the individual consumers and profiles that our devices and platforms want us to be, or we can remember that the truly evolved human doesn't go it alone. Being human is not about individual survival or escape. It's a team sport. Whatever future humans have, it will be together. Douglas Rushkoff is the author of the upcoming book, Team Human, and host of the Team Human podcast. Editor's note, in September 2020, Douglas published a follow-up to this story that examines the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is really what began me on this path of realizing that, like, oh yeah, like the people at the top of this thing are psychopaths. Like they're completely nightmare sociopaths. Like it's And it's like right on the head now. Like it's like they might as well be walking up to you and just be like bonk, right on your fucking head, like donk donk donk. Like it's very very clear. And like it's like they realize they're not needed. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. They aren't. They're completely unnecessary, right? Like that's the shameful reality of the capitalist structure and the capitalist system, is that the most worthless are the ones who get the most power. You're 100 right about these guys being psychopaths? Wow, yeah, of course. I'm right about a lot of things, man. I'm right about a lot of things. If I don't have a source for it, I don't typically believe it. And if somebody can outsource me, I'll change my tune. That's my position on everything, right? And so, yes, I am saying out loud to you right now that if everyone just listened to me, the world would be a better place. Oh, you're not going to find that one, buddy. You're not going to find that one. See, no one wants to talk about this when the Fermi paradox comes up. Yeah, exactly. Nobody wants to be like, yeah, humans are trash. Like, why would the aliens want to talk to us? I doubt technology is as neutral as people would like to believe, especially considering how much of it is driven by development for military purposes. Exactly. Like, if it can't be utilized by the military, it probably won't be utilized, right? And like most of the things that make it into the public sector are here because of military development, right? Handguns are really useful as a seed drill in the garden. Swords are useful opening really big letters. Yeah. The gospel according to John. That's right. Oh my God, guys. I'm so sorry. I gotta pause for a second. My dog is literally tearing everything apart because he can't find his toy. Hey, buddy. What's this? Milo. What's this? Go get it. Unreal. He just wants to play, dude. That's all he wants to do. He just wants to play. All day. That's his life. Not a bad life. I could do, like, couldn't you do with just, like, not having this existential burden? Like, I look at my little guy and I actually get a little jealous of him sometimes. I'm just like, all he really wants is cuddles, scratches, food, and play. And that's it. That's his whole existence. Everything else is just like... But if I do that, then, oh, well, I'm lazy. The privileged have entered their escape pods. Oh, wow. This same author. Maybe I won't read this out loud right now. I'll give this a read first. See what I think of it. But yeah, more or less. Like, the wealthy have escape pods. They can flee into them, right? Like it's very scary shit what we're doing. So a Pentagon official said he resigned because U.S. cybersecurity is no match for China, calling it kindergarten level. Like, he quit in September, told the Financial Times last week that the U.S. was far behind China on AI. We have no competing fighting chance against China in 15 to 20 years. A senior cybersecurity official at Pentagon said he quit. Nicholas Chilean joined the U.S. Air Force as his first chief software officer in August 2018. He worked to equip it and the Pentagon with the most secure and advanced software available. But Chilean quit on September 2nd. In his departing LinkedIn post, he cited the Pentagon's reluctance to make cybersecurity and AI a priority as a reason for his resignation. Speaking to the Financial Times in his first interview since leaving, Chilean said China was far ahead of the U.S. We have no competing fighting chance against China in 15 to 20 years. Right now, it's already a done deal. It's already over, in my opinion. He went on to say that the AI capabilities of cyber defenses of some government departments were at a kindergarten level. A number of U.S. departments have been subject to hacking attempts and ransomware attacks in recent years. And, like, this is serious, right? Like, when people hear, like, cybersecurity, they think of, like, hackers or something, right? But, like, all of these, all of the technology that's being used, right? Your jets, your boats, your aircraft carriers, all of this, have electronic security codes and have an electronic component. And if you can break through that security, you can take this shit over. Right? And if a Pentagon official is saying the United States has a kindergarten level of cybersecurity. Well, wouldn't it be hilarious if the United States sent its bombers over into the South China Sea in order to like bomb everything, and the Chinese just went, no, those bombers now, like the hatches are no longer going to open. Like they're just not going to be able to do that. They just take the bombers over, right? That's what cybersecurity is. Like that's what we are talking about. We are talking about being able to get into the systems of the fighter jets and prevent them from operating. And and these guys think they're going to go over and fuck with China? Nah. If I chase a ball down the street naked, I get called crazy. Exactly, Onward. Fuck that shit. Fuck that shit. Or they target U.S. factories. Oops. Now we're getting into real crazy territory, man. Because then it gets confusing. Like, who did what? Who does what? What's the story? Right? We're already easy to confuse. So now we're getting into just kind of the memes of things. Have I gone through all this stuff? Mussolini's daughter, Canada's Nazi monuments. Yeah. Going through the great hits. I will not allow the government to control every aspect of my life. That's the exclusive role of my employer. Like, why are we attaching any benefits whatsoever to employment? Like, it seems asinine to me. It seems completely asinine to me that we're attaching any benefits whatsoever to employment. Like, what are you talking about even? What are you talking about? I think he is grifting to put pressure on more U.S. money into his agency. Yeah, that's possible, Duke, that he's just, like, trying to raise awareness on this issue and like, being a bit hyperbolic about it, perhaps. But, like, the fact that he's doing it, like, it's his career, right? He's putting it out there. So, either he's doing it because he's genuinely concerned, or he's doing it in order to just get more money for the department, and it's all a plan. But to me, the result is the same, right? Like, it could possibly be that he is doing it on behalf of the organization, and it's creating like a false narrative that doesn't exist, that the United States actually is like doing okay on cybersecurity and all this. But I've seen enough stories as I've been following this that tell me that the United States is constantly underestimating the Chinese military. They are constantly doing this. Like the example that I always raise is like back in 2016, I think it was, the United States was running a military exercise in the South China Sea, right, as one does, I suppose. And the Chinese just lifted a submarine up in the middle of it, and the Americans didn't detect it. Sorry, this was back. This is during Bush. This is during the Bush years, which is caused the Bush administration to like increase their sonar technology, which then in turn started to screw with orca and whales and stuff, right? So you have all these stories of like blue whales dying because they don't know where they are and they're totally fucking lost, and they get disconnected from their normal patterns, and so they end up fucking in Antarctica and shit. Like, because the sonar technology was changed to be able to detect these Chinese submarines that they couldn't detect before. So, like, the Chinese are constantly one-upping the Americans, like, constantly. And I will not be surprised at all, like, even a little tiny bit, if, as things move forward, the Chinese will have some kind of technology that the Americans don't even know about, that they're just unaware of it. Right? Like that I think is actually realistic. Like, what if it turns out that all of this like UFO stuff that we're talking about these days is straight up just a Chinese project? Just straight up, just like like we built these vessels, like we've got a technology that the Americans don't have access to. Why would we fucking share that technology with the Americans? Like, why would we ever bother doing that? I think that's pretty unlikely, considering it's very difficult to keep secrets. Like, it's very difficult to keep secrets. So, that would be a bit aggressive. But the Chinese have definitely one up the Americans before in the technology field. For sure they have. I think a lot of the military contractors are experts at milking money, and that means slowing tech advancement just to extend contracts. Can't fix that. Yeah. Well, capitalism doing capitalism, right? Hey, how you doing, bud? Just watching and doing the dishes. Yeah, that's a good time to do it. That's what I do. I watch shit while I do the dishes. But China forces us to offshore all our manufacturing, John, and I'm very upset. Yeah. Dang it, man. China forced us to offshore all our manufacturing. That's the same kind of thinking that's like, oh, these immigrants are coming to take my job. And you're like, no, your owner is betraying you. That's what's going on. Like your owner is actively betraying you, and you're just letting him do it. Like when you blame immigrants for this situation, your owner loves it. The owners are just like, oh, sweet, I'm totally off the hook, right? They're blaming the immigrants instead of the person who's actually in charge of the system, right? Like, brutal. Oh yeah, here's Richard Wolff reporting on something I've already reported on. So I got the scoop on Mr. Wolff, but I'm happy to see that he's joining us. U.S. middle class is officially gone. The top 1% own more than the middle 60%, while the bottom 35% own nothing. GOP pushed for this. Dems allow it. The people suffer it. But for how much longer? And as you can see, right, this is the graph. The U.S. is officially a banana republic. The top 1% now own more wealth than the entire middle class. You know how I keep saying it's going to get more obvious? You know how I keep saying it's going to get more obvious? Obvious. Like, the people coming in here and acting as like wealth apologists and all this kind of stuff, they're not different than Nazis. Like, they're not, like, they're acting as apologists for one of the worst betrayals of a society in the history of humankind. Like, we are witnessing a complete destruction of the civil society down to the earth itself, just completely wiped out, so that, like, a small, tiny group of people can have more wealth than even the ancient pharaohs had, right? Like, the amount of wealth that, like, I had a conversation with a guy online, and he was so fucking deluded. He was trying so hard to convince me that, like, capitalists take risks. Capitalists take risks. Once you have $100 billion, there's no such thing as risk. There's literally no such thing as risk, right? Like, Jeff Bezos can just lose $50 billion. $50 billion, and still have $100 billion. There's no risk. It's not a risk, right? Like, a risk is like putting your money into a business that you're not sure is going to work, and it's every dollar you got, right? That's risk, right? But we're no longer in a period where there is such a thing as risk in the conversation. Like, unless you're really, really convinced that mom and pop shop down the street is what we're talking about. Like, and people come in here all the time and peddle that stupid bullshit. Well, the mom and pop shop, like, literally, dude, we're talking about Walmart and Amazon and, like, Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation. Like, this is what we're fucking talking about. I don't give a fuck about your mom and pop shop down the street. Who gives a shit, right? Like, they don't matter at all, like, at all to the conversation. Especially as this shit's going on, right? Like, why do you want to talk about the minority wealth holders, right? We should be talking about the people who have the majority of the wealth, shouldn't we? Right? Don't you think if you actually want to talk about an economy, talk about where the power lies, you should talk about who has the majority of wealth? It's like I'm talking to people in like a medieval kingdom, and they keep trying to talk to me about, like, the tax collector. That's who they're talking about. They're like, that tax collector, he's the problem, and we got to do something about that tax collector. And all the tax collector. Literally, like, there's literally a king, right? You see how there's a king? Shouldn't we be talking about the king? Oh, King Schming. Tax collector, that's the guy, right? Even if they lost everything, the worst thing would be they'd have to get a job. Same with landlords. I have no sympathy for capitalists. Exactly. Like, they'd have to actually do something useful, is the problem. Zuckerberg's, hey Matthias, how you doing, bud? Zuckerberg's 13 million LA mansion actually pays him for him to own it. So how is anyone taking a risk in that wealth bracket? Exactly. And like, once you attain a certain level of wealth, you literally can't become poor anymore. Like, you can't lose it. You have to actually purposefully give it away because of the way how the system of interest and how the system works. Once you have like $1 billion, the amount of money that you're accruing just by having the billions of dollars, right, that the bank will just give you, right, so that you don't move your money somewhere else, is enormous. It's enormous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Even if he lost the majority of his assets, the investors would still be willing to lend him money because of his previous financial success. Exactly. There's that too, right? He is part of a class. And the class protects itself, which was perfectly articulated in the film American Psycho, right? That in the film American Psycho, Christian Bale's character, who I'm blanking on the name of it, but Bale's character literally goes on a killing spree, right? And just murders a whole bunch of people, like in public, in his building, all of this kind of stuff. And all of that is essentially covered up and protected. But he is completely protected by the system of capital. That there's a scene in it, right? So he kills a bunch of. If you've never seen this movie, spoilers ahead, all that kind of stuff. But American Psycho is like watching in my view. So he kills a bunch of people in his apartment and like keeps them in rooms and things like this, right? Like and so when he goes on this massive killing spree, he shows up at this apartment, which isn't his apartment. It's the apartment of the first man that he kills, right? So he kills this man and then uses this apartment as a place to store a whole bunch of other bodies as he continues to kill people. And then he goes to try to clean up his mess after he thinks he's been caught, right? He thinks that he's been caught. And the lady, the person who's showing the apartment, right, the landlady, when he shows up, the place is completely clean. There's no bodies. There's no blood. There's nothing, right? And the lady is talking to him, and you can tell when that lady is talking to him, she knows who he is. She knows what's going on, right? And then he realizes that she knows what's going on, and so he politely excuses himself and leaves. And the way that the American capitalist class has attempted to explain this away is that, oh, that character, he's so delusional. He didn't kill those people after all. It was all just in his mind, right? But the real truth is that capital will protect itself. That she knows he's a serial killer. She knows he murdered all those people. She also knows that the apartment goes for $1.5 million. And that if she contacts the police and turns this thing into a crime scene, she's not going to be able to sell this thing for $1.5 million, right? That the police will turn it into a big crime scene. It'll become a big investigation. She won't have access to the space. She'll be losing out on money for herself. So what does she do? She cleans the mess up herself. The guy shows up. She tells him to go away so that she can turn around and sell the property for $1.5 million. And it's the same story later on, like the very next scene, because he's in like a manic state at this point, because he doesn't quite understand what's going on. He goes and finds his lawyer, and he confesses. He confesses to his lawyer, right? Outright states it to his lawyer's face, and his lawyer looks at him and says, I have no idea what you're talking about. That man you claim you killed, I had lunch with in Europe. And so he's outright vouching on behalf of his client in order to protect himself and his client and to protect the institution that he works for, simply by saying, oh no, I had dinner with that guy. I have an alibi. I'm creating an alibi for my client and my business. And this creates a narrative of capital protecting itself, and that it does so naturally, right? This lawyer doesn't want to have this scandal in his business. He doesn't want this business that he works for to have this enormous scandal of a sociopathic, like a psychopathic killer. Actually, the son of the owner of the establishment is a psychopath who has killed people and has confessed it to me. He doesn't want to deal with any of that, right? He wants everything to go smoothly, and so he just, no, that's fine. That's fine. And so outright, like, they know that this guy's a psychopath. They know that he kills people, and they're fine with it. They're fine with it. That they don't want to upset the apple cart. And that's the moral of American Psycho. And the cover was always like, oh, the guy is just delusional and he just imagined it all. That's not what's happening. All of that shit happened. All that shit happened to him. Right? And then he got covered up by the capitalist class itself. And this is exactly what would happen to someone like Bezos. Right? Like, well, you think when these guys meet up on Jeffrey Epstein's sex island that they're like gonna oust one another? Like, think of the house of cards that could come crashing down for these guys if they started to get pegged in like a Jeffrey, like, why do you think Gates has come out so strong and actually made like public statements, right? Because he's starting to feel the heat, because he's starting to realize that, like, oh shit, like this could really turn into something serious, right? And it could. Like, you're talking about, like, why were you on a flight going to a pedophile sex island? What's up? And so his PR team said, just get ahead of it. Say that you talked to Epstein in order to try to get him involved in something on your the Gates Foundation or something like this, which is such a nonsense statement. Why would Gates ever need, like, some petty lowlife? Why would he need his money? Gates has hundreds of $billions. Like, what does he need this guy's money for? Why do you need this guy, a already previously convicted pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein, an already previously convicted sex trafficker, right? He did, by the way, 2 years for that. And why do you need to do business with this guy? Why were you even interested in doing business with this guy? It turns out, when you say business, you mean little girls. That's what you mean. I know, Milo. I'm talking about Jeffrey Epstein again. Talking about Jeffrey Epstein again instead of playing with Milo. The greatest crisis in the pug's meager ideology. Right? Play, scratch, cuddle, feed. That's it. That's all I care about. After Daisy's husband kills his lover and her husband kills Gatsby, they retreat into their money. Exactly. Yep. Wall Street guys need to be able to blow off steam, John. Yeah, don't pull on threads. Exactly, dude. Exactly. Like... And I love talking about the art because, from Variety, Squid Game director Hwang Dong-hyuk on Netflix hit Korean series and prospects for a sequel. And in it, he explicitly states, I wanted to write a story that was an allegory or fable about modern capitalist society. Something that depicts an extreme competition, somewhat like the extreme competition of life. But I wanted it to use the kind of characters we've all met in real life, Huang said. As a survival game, it is entertainment and human drama. The games portrayed are extremely simple and easy to understand. That allows viewers to focus on the characters rather than being distracted by trying to interpret the rules. A really great read. I'm not going to read it all the way all out for you guys, but I really recommend. Honestly, I keep saying it on this channel, and I hope you're all doing it. Squid Game has become must-watching. It's got incredibly poignant things to say about the nature of wealth accumulation. It has incredibly poignant things to say about what happens to the wealthy when they accumulate wealth and what the society can do. And what the society will be able to do. I'm not going to spoil it because I think that it's a show worth investigating on yourself. And I've really noticed that that's more or less how the society is feeling about Squid Game. That people are pitching Squid Game. Squid Game is like the imagery in Squid Game, like the shapes and all that, started to seep into the culture more readily, but no one wants to play the spoiler game. Everybody is very much like, nope, you got to see this yourself. And that's not going to last too much longer, I think. Maybe a year. But really, really, really important viewing. Because it makes things that you suspect more clear. That's one way that I would say it. That especially once you get to know the villain of the piece, there's a lot of clarity that comes in regards to the opinion of Juan Dong-Huk's of capitalism. Oh, man. Man, imagine feeling like this is something worth doing. Just imagine feeling that's something worth doing, right? Like, they're making a live action version? No, Squid Game is a live action. Squid Game is a live action version. Midnight Mass. I don't know if I've ever even heard of Midnight Mass, Matthias. Midnight Mass. What's Midnight Mass? Oh, it's a fairly new one. Horror. That's probably why I've avoided it, honestly. I don't like watching horror just by myself. Oh yeah, this is going to have some like real cult vibes. Oh yeah, vampires. Yeah. Oh yeah, okay, cool. Cool. I'm kind of in, actually. Like, you're telling me there's like a church and there's like some evil force and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that looks cool as shit. I've been thinking about, wouldn't it be cool to do like an underwater like space, or an underwater space exploration, but an underwater like explorer, like your scientists and you're in a facility that's underwater, and then you encounter a species you've never encountered before, and they're all like light and airy and like and everything is very like beautiful with them, and they have like a glow, and they have kind of a human way of looking, right? And there's a lot of discussion amongst the staff of like, hey, what's up with these guys and all this kind of stuff, and then they find a way to communicate, right? And like the creatures seem to have some kind of like telepathic communication or something along these lines. And it keeps being framed as like a scientific discovery that they have found these underwater creatures and all this kind of stuff. And so as the thing moves forward, of course, the protagonist and one of these creatures, these underwater creatures, form a real bond. And the goal of the piece would be to really get the audience to a place where the audience gets to a place where they're really rooting for this relationship. That would be the goal, right? That you would be rooting for this relationship. Like the underwater sea creature and the protagonist coming together and forming a friendship, or maybe more, and like get them really, really rooting for this until eventually the humans invite the creatures into their facility, and then it's just straight up vampires. Just like straight up vampires, right? Like that's what I would love to see. Just straight up, just like trick the audience into believing that the creatures are good, and get them all rooting together. Like this is a human story about connection and communication and all this kind of stuff. And and then just twist it on them. That's what I would love to see. You know what's fun, TRX, is that every single time you show up, a bunch of this spam happens. Yeah, have you noticed this? TRX? Every time you show up, I get spammed. Have you noticed this? Just a coincidence? And now you're asking me about a Discord? Just a coincidence, bud? I'm surprised that Asian films are going mainstream in the US. Wasn't the case in my youth, except art movie houses. Yeah, man, I'm happy about that too. And it's because, like, Asian films are baller, right? They're just, like, doing cool baller shit. Like that's really what it is in my mind. Like they're just like, and also like the tradition, like the art tradition of Asian societies is distinct and interesting, right? Like I've studied Japanese theater, for example, and some of the stuff that exists in Japanese theater is just brilliant and just absolutely beautiful. And so I'm really, really interested in anytime like Japan or Korea comes out with some stuff like, and they're willing to experiment in ways, or not experiment, but just like they're willing to do things that we're not. Well, I don't know, TRX. Why would you say such vile and racist things? Anyway, let's get back into the memes. I love this one. 65% of Americans believe they are above average in intelligence. Results of 2 nationally representative surveys. 65% of Americans believe they are above average in intelligence. Oh, check Discord live stream. Players? Oh my god, I see what you mean. I'm sorry, bud. I didn't understand what you meant. You mean like the Squid Games brought to like it's actually the games. Players chosen for a real life version of Squid Game. Since its release last month, Netflix original series Squid Game has become one of the most watched shows on the platform, and it currently holds the #1 spot in the US today. Yeah. The gory survival drama, blah, blah, blah. While there won't be millions of dollars at stake either, players will be given tracksuits identical to those. Yup. The life footage will include... there's spoilers in here, so I won't... Straight up, they're just doing like a reality TV show, like... It's going to be like Squid Game themed, basically. That's hilarious, dude. Like, that's hilarious. I don't know if that's good or bad. Like, I don't know how to feel about it, you know? That's what it is. Like, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about it. Like, it feels kind of creepy, right? It feels kind of creepy, especially given the themes that exist in Squid Game. That now we are becoming... I can't go further without spoiling stuff, so I'm not going to. But it just... This has a creepy vibe about it. I don't know that I like this. I mean, at the same time, I'm kind of like, yeah, like this is what humans do. Like we just iterate on shit and create all kinds of stuff. It does have a very creepy sort of a vibe, for sure. Capitalists will sell you the rope to hang them. Exactly, dude. Exactly. PG-13 Squid Games. Well, who said they were PG-13? Hold on, they didn't say that people wouldn't be shot. But like that's what's, again, I can't really go further without spoiling anything, so I'm just going to stop talking about it. Please everybody watch Squid Game. Like I think in like a year's time I will happily openly talk about it, but I just don't want to spoil anything for anybody because I feel like it is better to just see it and have it unfold. Dad, we need to slightly reduce working hours so we can have more time to play. The exploited also find time to play Jim Jam, but their play is not joy. It is a macabre ritual, an awaiting death, a suspension of work in order to lighten the pressure of the violence accumulated during the activity of production. In the illusionary world of commodities, play is also an illusion. We imagine we are playing, while all we are really doing is monotonously repeating the roles assigned to us by capital. This really hit me, actually. This really hit me. Because I play video games, and I play, right? I would consider myself playing, but I don't really, like... I worry that the play that I am engaging in is exclusively there as just a passing of the time. Oh my God, spammers. Don't need the spammers. Don't need the spammers. Don't need the spammers. And like the idea that even our moments of play, even the moments where we are giving ourselves permission to just entertain ourselves, are not really being pursued for genuine reasons. They're being pursued exclusively as a way to distract ourselves or to hide ourselves or to escape the burden of capital. And that even within play, the burden of capital is, you know what, bud, TRX, I don't trust you, bud. Straight up, go away. I think you're part of it, dude. Like, every single time this happens, you're in the chat. And you're not really engaging with the chat. Like, I just don't think you're here genuinely, and I think you're part of this problem. So... And because our play is only happening as a way to distract us from capital, it's not actually building ourselves up. And and because of and we're not actually engaging in play for the sake of play even, that we are attempting to use it as an escape valve and as a way to, and ultimately it ends up reflecting the capitalist world that we live in, right? That everything is still designed and modeled in order to sort of justify and create and affirm the reality of the capitalist system. Sorry about this, guys. I feel like there's like just one loser who just can't get over themselves. Must be a symptom of their paste consumption. Yeah. I think the most likely thing, like, I don't think there's a they. I think it's just one of them, and they just don't have anything better to do with their time. Like, it's they're just doing what losers do, right? It's kind of odd to me because you would think that Netflix, like, I mean, YouTube makes it so that you guys can't post comments and stuff, right? Like, it'll ban comments. You would think the first thing it would be interested in is like, oh, first time poster, just posting like a bunch of stuff one after the other. And it's the same exact message, right? You would think that would just get blinked right out. You'd think that YouTube would immediately just be like, oh yeah, that's just spam, very clearly. But that makes it through. But sometimes you guys say things and it doesn't, because the thing that you're saying is like poo or poo poo or something. Like it's so silly. Like I feel like YouTube could be doing a better job of making sure these spammers don't end up in the chat, right? Like I just don't understand why something like it's obvious, right? It's obvious. It's the same name saying the same things repeatedly. Like, at least give me an option, right? At least give me the option. Like I understand why they might not want to do that, because there's lots of dude, it's odd that you've got like a backup. Like, that's what's odd. Right? Like, you've got a backup and you just had that ready to go, right? And you've got other ones. Like, maybe actually try being in the chat. Like, maybe try to actually join the chat. Maybe actually try to interact, ask questions, be part of the conversation, right? Because, like, near as I can tell, bud, I think that you are the one that's bringing all this spam in. Like, it seems pretty clear. Like, you come in, the spam comes in. You're not here, the spam's not here, right? It seems quite straightforward. So that's where you're at, bud. as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's childish what you're doing. And like you're pretending like I'm not the spammer, trust me, bro. I'm a Marxist Leninist that I don't actually ask questions or comment or say anything. Yeah, I absolutely hate these people. Like this feels really dumb, dude. This feels really dumb. Like you come in with like a backup immediately, like you had it ready to go. Like what do you fucking think is happening here, dude? Like I notice myself when I try to create something artistic, I often wonder in the back of my head if it will satisfy other people, even if I have no intention of sharing it. Exactly. Yeah, you can't just create something to have it created and to just see it and to just because it was in you and you wanted to manifest it, right? Like you're not really permitted to do that. That everything is just done for the sake of either selling it or for the sake of distracting yourself from something. Right? Yeah. When I wonder if it would be good commercially even, yeah. I haven't seen Misty in a long time, POC. I think that she's amidst like a whole moving thing. And so I haven't seen her in a bit. Okay. TRX, I'm going to make it as clear as I possibly can to you, bud. I'm not really in the mood to talk to you. Right? I'm like 99.9% sure you're the spammer. I think that you're just sort of masturbating over there. Right? Do you have porn playing? Are you jerking off right now? That essentially feels like what's going on right now. So like, you're pretty low on the totem pole for me, bud. Like, the only thing I think I'm interested in talking to you about is like, why do you do that? Like, what do you think? What are you gaining from that? Like, and don't deny it. Like, don't deny it. Like, it's really clear what's going on. Like, why do you feel the need to do this? Like, it's really, really sad what you're doing, dude. And I don't understand why you feel the need to do it. Well, I mean, you know me, guys. Like, I'm the humanist, right? I know it can be frustrating, but the spammers are just losers. Yeah, but I mean, like, one group of people always says that of another group of people, right? Like, what's the story? What's the story, Wishbone? Like, that's what I'm curious about. Like, you're telling me that there is, like, a dude sitting in front of his computer, and instead of attempting to, like, spread joy or help or to question or even push back, right? Or even do any of that kind of stuff, you're literally just spamming with bots, like just filling the world with garbage, right? That's all you're doing is you're just filling the world with garbage, and that's what you're doing. Like, I'm genuinely curious, like, because it's like it's even worse than trolling, right? Like it's like because at least trolls can kind of be clever about it, right? And because there's kind of an art to trolling people, right? But like a spammer, especially like spamming the bile, right? The like unforgivable bullshit, right? Like that's stunning. Like, that's stunning. All you're doing is coming in and just being disruptive and being a pain in the ass. Guys pull out a Wishbone reference, love it. Yeah, I say that to my dog all the time. Like he'll be begging for something, and I'll be like, "What's the story, Wishbone?" Like he doesn't really know. No, and that's the thing. Onward. That's why I think that it is. That's why I think it's just this guy, right? Like that's why I think it's just this guy, because like. It's very targeted. It's very specific. Like when he's here, the spam is here. When he's not, the spam isn't. And I haven't really been like actively reporting. I've just been like shutting it down. But it's just getting embarrassing now. Like, it's just getting embarrassing. Like, I should also do a report. Sorry about this, guys, but it's just getting really, really, like, it. I can only like ignore it for so long. Like, and at first, like at first it kind of was my strategy, but now I've really got to talk about it, don't I? Like, I really do have to address it. That like, there's a person coming in here spamming "kill all Jews." Like, yikes, right? Big yikes. And like, Toot, what do I think about North Korea? I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, Toot, you're coming in very suspiciously. I've just gone through some big spammers coming in, spamming, pretending like they're not, that kind of stuff. And so I assume that you're just a part of that. If you are, you are, and if you're not, you're not. But I'm just telling you what it is. What do I think about North Korea? First of all, I don't really know enough about North Korea to really have like a fully fleshed, formulated opinion. They seem like a group of people that are trying their best in extraordinary circumstances. I'll talk about the things that are usually omitted from the conversation in regards to North Korea, like the fact that they were obliterated by the Americans in the early 1900s. Like, they were obliterated completely, like down to the earth. Like, the structure of the place was completely destroyed. And because nobody actually talks about North Korea that way, then they always act like, oh, it's such a weird, strange, crazy dictatorship place. And it's like, not really what's going on. Yeah, I mean, I highly doubt the people there believe in unicorns. The media is absolutely lying about them. Of course. Yeah, of course. Of course. Like, of course they are. Why would we believe the media? Why would we believe the media about anything, right? At this point. Like, the media has shown us there is no depth. There is no bottom to the lies that they're willing to tell. Like, for real, the unicorn lie alone, right? Trying to convince people that unicorn, yeah, that this was a story. Do you guys not know this? Oh, okay, this is great. This is fucking ridiculous. North Korea unicorn. Unicorn lair discovered in North Korea, right? And of course, like, it's not literal. Like, what the Koreans are talking about is part of their legends and their lore, right? And this is being taken and misconstrued to, like, has broken the incredible news that archaeologists in Pia have discovered a unicorn slayer. Like, that's literally not what happened. Like, this is misinformation on a ridiculous level. That what they're doing to North Korea is they're trying to show it as like a really kind of kooky, crazy sort of place. That's what they're really trying to do. Anytime I've looked at North Korea, I have seen a people who, in the face of extraordinary odds and having experienced extraordinary hardship and heartbreak, often at the hands of Westerners, have managed to build, during a period of war, no less. Remember, they're still technically at war with South Korea. During a period of war, they have managed to rebuild a society, literally from the rubble, right? From literal rubble. They've managed to rebuild a society that is stable, that is advancing, that is improving itself, right? I haven't seen anything come out of North Korea that I think is egregious or outrageous or beyond the pale or any of this kind of stuff that you hear come out of Western sources. So again, I don't know. I've never really done the deep dive into Korea or Korean politics to the degree that I feel comfortable having a really well-formed opinion and to talk about it meaningfully. But, like, It seems to me that North Korea is and it also seems to me like North Korea is doing what it can to get into reunification with South Korea. That I think that it's pursuit of reunification with South Korea so that they can once again be Korea. I think that is genuine, and I think that they mean that, and they're interested in doing that. And so I think, and that would be a beautiful reunification. I think if they could manage to do it, I think it would be a beautiful reunification. I think it would only be good for the world to see that. And of course, the United States is going to stand in between that as much as they can. So, yeah, those NKs are so silly. Ha ha ha. Did you know Putin sold the 2016 election, John? Yeah. Exactly, dude. Like, it's just like, oh, but Russiagate. Yeah, Russiagate's real. That 100% happened. I think smaller channels get targeted because they tend to be less mods. They also tend to be more creator interaction. People who troll just like seeing people suffer. Yeah. Well, and I think that you could get in and really get a reaction from people, right? Like, I think that you could get like a really strong reaction from people. And I mean, that is what they're looking for. I feel like the reaction I've given already is a bit too much, honestly. But like, they want to see people cry and they want to see people pout and whine and complain, right? When in reality, it's just sad. Like, it's just very, very sad. Like, it's sad that this person is using racial epithets. It's sad that this person is using hatred. And it's sad that this person is in a position in their life where they feel they need to do that. Right? And chances are good they're just a kid, right? Chances are good they're just some 13 or 14-year-old who has no friends, right? All they know is the computer screen, right? Maybe their mom screams at them or something, right? Like, they don't... So, like, I don't think it's serious. Like, if they were a serious person, they would be doing serious things, right? That's really what it comes down to. Like, it's hard for me to get angry, and it's hard for me to, like, pound the table, and it's hard for me to, like, get really upset about it because they're not serious. If they were serious, they'd be doing serious things. But they're doing little kid shit, right? They're just doing little kid bullshit, walking around, spitting out this stupid bile, and they don't know what else to do. Because they're probably just turning around and getting the hatred from something and then turning around and putting that hatred somewhere else. And they've chosen me for this moment, right? And once they're no longer welcome here, once they realize, like, I'm not really plussed about this, like, I'm not going to give them what they want, they'll just move on. A little while ago, a guy with a few alts spammed Thought Slime stream with anti-Semitism. Yeah, I mean, it happens, right? That's the internet for you. I'm just surprised that YouTube doesn't give me the option to create, like, I don't even want to see, like, spamming messages if they're nice, right? Like, if somebody's saying, like, yay, you're great, I don't need to see 5 messages of that, right? And especially if it's somebody who's, like, posting for the first time. Like, I don't need to see, like, 5 messages of, like, clown noses or something. Like, I'm not interested. I'm interested in a more interactive sort of experience. I'm interested in a more controlled chat. I know that as I grow, that's going to kind of go away. Like, that. But as I grow, there's going to be tools. So, like, all you guys are going to get, like, little labels and things like this. So I'll be able to pick you out of the chat. And of course, if you're like a donator and all that kind of stuff, so there'll be tiers as the channel grows and as I get more tools, that's going to become a thing. But I am going to make it, like, pretty firm. Like, I don't want to see spam. Like, when I go over to Hassan B's chat, right, and I take a look at what Hassan B, like, Hassan doesn't really interact with his chat because it's just like a stream of stupid bullshit. The whole time, it's just a stream of just nonsense. Just people being like, hi, and hey, and oh yeah, and like emojis, and just spam, and spam, and spam, and spam. And I'm just like, bro, like, no, thank you. No, thank you. Not interested in that. Like, not interested in that. Like, I feel like if people started to spam the chat, even with nice messages, I would just be like, nah, Like, nah. I'll probably give a timeout to the people who do that initially, but like, I will absolutely. I can get a chat bot to help with spam. Look at you, Null, coming in with some knowledge. You're probably right about that, dude. Like, I just don't know. YouTube chat bot spam. All right. I'm gonna look it up. Won't go any deeper on the chat or on the stream. Whenever I watch Twitch, I feel like a boomer. Yeah, dude, I'm the same way. Like, that's why I don't really stream on Twitch. Although I should. Like, I feel like there is a way to do multi-platform streaming, and I feel like I should just do it. I've been avoiding it though because I feel that way about Twitch. I feel like I'm like too old for Twitch. Yeah, that's when you move to pay super chat. Exactly. Well, and that should happen at 1,000 subscribers, right? Which I am trundling towards. I am more than a little convinced that the channel has been shadow banned. That I experienced a big boom of growth between like 100 and 300 subscribers, but then very steadily things have started to become more grindy, like a little bit more grindy as I'm grinding up to 1,000 subscribers. It's just like a little slower, like I'm getting less traffic. I can see it. And it's not the quality of the content. The quality of the content has remained consistent. It's 100% that I think that I have been deprioritized in the algorithm. And but channel's growing in spite of it. So I'll get there. High quality socialism. Good to see you, bud. Good to see you. This is your first time here. Nice to see you, bud. Nice to see that there's actually some quality socialism going on. Not that inferior socialism. I've moderated on Twitch and set up Nightbot, and it's a really good tool. I think it works on YouTube, but there are lots of options. That's good. Yeah, and the streaming program that I'm using right now to just do YouTube, there is another streaming program that I have actually already downloaded and like played with a little bit that does multi-platform, and then that's how you get all the like little dings and all that kind of stuff, and you can set it all up. I need to actually just do it. You know what I mean? But I'm more focused on tomorrow's protest. Tomorrow's protest is where my energy is at right now. Hassan's chat is a stream of Pepe's going by at 60 miles per hour. Yeah, I'm like, what's the point of this? I know, I'm the same way. I'm just like, what the hell? Like, what is the point of that? It's, I can't imagine being the person on the other end being like, Pepe, 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 just like emote. Like, it just seems, what is anyone getting out of it? You know? What is anybody getting out of it? So. Well, looks like the chat has calmed down a little bit, which is nice. Yeah, people only hate Elon Musk because he comes from an emerald mining fortune made in apartheid South Africa. He buys ideas and pretends he's an inventor. He's a union-busting and abusive employer. He's hoarding $175.6 billion in stolen wages during a pandemic. He encouraged a coup. And I love that they don't put punctuation. It's just like a continuous list. Yeah. Oh, they're stuck in dopamine loops. Yeah, you're probably right, dude. You're probably right. It's just like, I'm part of something. I'm part of something. I'm part of this. Yeah, I'm part of it. Right? It's like when you're at a concert and there's like 14-year-old girls being like, woo! Right? When I looked up some of those emote Twitch things and asked my younger friend if I was understanding correctly, he made fun of me by saying, happy boomer noises. Yeah. That's the way it's going to go for us millennials, Loaf. That's the way it's going to go. Like, we're the okay boomer shit is going to happen to us, dude. The okay boomer shit is absolutely going to happen. Let's see. What do I think of AES states like Vietnam, Cuba, DPRK, China, Laos? Workers don't own the means of production. Yep, that's correct. That would be the critique, right? That would be the critique. But if I wanted to be nicer to those places, I would say that many of them are still in a growth period. and just exiting what could be called a recovery period, right? Like a place like Vietnam, for example, right? Vietnam in the 60s and 70s was blown up, like fucking blown up. Well, you don't just bounce off of that. You don't just like wake up and go like, oh, okay, the bombers are gone, so la 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 la, right? That's not how it works. That it takes a long, long time. China is just a capitalist country. I don't think so. Like, I don't think so. They certainly... Here's the analogy, Quality. Like, here's the analogy. Think of capitalism as a fire, okay? Think of capitalism as a fire. Fires are useful, right? It's useful to have a fire in your cottage, right? You want to have a fire in the oven so that the oven can warm up the cottage, and also so that you can cook food, right? Fire is useful. There are uses for it, and what the Chinese have done is they've taken their fire and they've put it in the place where the fire goes, and they have special tools that they interact with the fire, and if the fire gets too big or it gets kind of out of control, they turn the log and they mess with the fire and they make the fire less of a threat, and they interact with the fire insofar it is beneficial, and then they close the oven and ensure that the fire cannot get out. Compare that to what Westerners are doing with their fire. Their statement is essentially, well, fire is so great. Let's let the fire out of the fireplace, right? And the fire will then go through, and whatever the fire wants is what happens, and that's the invisible hand of the market or whatever you want to do, right? And you can see pretty clearly with this analogy how, like, yes, it is true that that China opened itself up to capitalist markets, right? But it only did that because it needed to plug in to the larger market. And when it did this under Deng, right? When it did this, it was highly critiqued by everyone. Lots of people said that, oh, China's, like, the socialist project of China is over and all that kind of stuff. And the capitalists assumed that China would join the neoliberal project, that it would just be part of the neoliberal structure. But now under Xi, we're seeing very clearly that that is not the case. And in fact, that Deng's gamble paid out, and that by letting capitalist markets in, Deng's statement was, we'll let a few people get rich first, right? But the plan always was to get the wealth into the country by whatever means necessary, right? To move forward as a people, doing this, sacrificing as we must in order to recover from the 100 years of humiliation and the grinding poverty that existed in China. And now that process has finished, and Deng is still alive. Like, you can talk to him about this shit. Xi Jinping is kind of smoothing it back out, right? And ensuring that the capitalists aren't taking the country over, ensuring that the capitalists don't corrupt their governing system. Xi Jinping was elected on a policy of corruption reduction, right? At least with the USSR, the workers actually owned the means of production through the Workers' Soviet, which controlled economic policies. However, the USSR was the only nation to do this. Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly correct because the workers didn't really own the means of production, right? Those Workers' Soviets did exist, but it was closer to a state capitalist sort of system. And again, this really comes down to something I think that's really important to talk about, which is the transition of socialism into communism is a long-term project. It is a multi-generational project. And the reason why Westerners are so impatient about it, and the reason why they can't really get their head around this idea, is because Western culture really does think in quarters. Maybe annually, but we really just think in quarters. Line go up over quarter good. That's it. That's the best that we do. We certainly don't plan in 10-year increments, and we certainly don't plan in 100-year increments the way the Chinese do, right? That the Chinese have an economic plan. It's a 100-year plan that they revisit once every 4 or 5 years in order to sort of recalibrate and readjust and sort of figure things out. And we don't have anything like that whatsoever. We don't have any idea of a long-term, 100-year, century-long plan built into our society. And in fact, because we're a multi-party democracy, even if we did create such a plan, another party can come in and just eliminate it, right? So it's like this constant washing away, whereas the Chinese system, through the National People's Congress, is more responsive to the needs of the people, is able to create large plans and execute on those plans, and is able to do things like in what my view is that Deng against Mao, he actually was against Mao, right? Mao didn't want to see this happen for obvious reasons, because Mao, was the beginning of the whole thing. But Deng took a gamble. He took a big gamble, and asked of his citizens to sacrifice. And because the populace understands and understood that what they were doing was akin to going to war, that it wasn't just some capitalists exploiting us so that they can take the money and offshore it, and then we get fucked over, and then big protest movements and all this kind of shit like you're seeing in the West, that instead they understood that this is a sacrifice that we are all doing together for the betterment of not only our future selves, but also our children. They were more willing to go along with it. And all of the polling data and everything that I've seen about China says that this is kind of understood. There's something called the Made in China movement that exists throughout China, where like we just think Made in China is just like a thing that they put on the label and all this. The Chinese people are extremely proud of what they accomplished. They are extremely proud of what they've done. When they see something that says Made in China, that is a badge of honor that they wear. And they are very, very pleased at what their society and what their civilization has accomplished. And Deng wasn't just a dictator who just decided to do this and dictated and all this kind of stuff. He was a continuation of the project of communism that the Chinese call themselves socialist with Chinese characteristics, because they understand that it's transitionary. They understand that there is like we've got to steadily move in the direction. And in terms of projection, the Chinese are exactly right on cue. Like they're absolutely doing it. Sure, they're not to a point where the workers actually own the means of production, but that's likely the next phase of all of this, right? That the big thing that the Chinese are concerned about now is the incoming American war. That's a big reason why they're unwilling to transfer the means of production into the hands of the workers at the moment, because there is a war about to happen. And they can't simultaneously do a big internal restructure of what's happening in their society while also stabilizing themselves in a war effort, which is exactly what is happening to the Chinese at the moment. So I'm quite sympathetic to the place that the Chinese are at right now. I understand why they have done what they have done. It has been successful without a doubt. Without a doubt, it's been successful. And so I'm very curious to see what happens next. I'll be very curious to see how they do in this American war. Xi Jinping is based, but that is because he is regulating a previously unregulated market. The market always was regulated. The market always was regulated. Like, the idea that it was an unregulated market is outright wrong. It always was regulated. It just wasn't so tightly enforced, right? That they had things kind of loose. But Xi Jinping has made it absolutely clear, right? That the capitalists are not in charge. According to your logic, FDR would be a communist. I mean, FDR was doing what he was doing on behest of the communists and the socialists. The halls of power were surrounded by socialists and communists. The reason FDR was doing what he was doing is because he knew that if he didn't, the communists and the socialists would foment a revolution. Right? He said as much. So FDR himself was not a communist. His goal was to salvage capitalism, which he succeeded at. Literally on his deathbed, he said his greatest accomplishment was saving capitalism. That the mistake that the communists and the socialists made under FDR is that they didn't kill capitalism. That was the error that they made. But the reason, like, FDR is not a communist himself. He had to capitulate a lot of stuff to the communists. That's the history of that. Like, Deng is like, they're different figures in different times in different societies, right? Like, Deng didn't do what he was doing with a protest movement at his heels. He wasn't doing what he was doing out of fear of losing power or overthrow a revolution the way that FDR was, right? Yeah, the constant washing away is exactly why Toronto has poor transit. Yeah, and why lots of things are so bad here in North America. Like Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House, and the Bush administration removed them, right? Like, very, very clear-cut shit like this. Don't forget to mention the protest before the stream ends. Yep, protest. Please come. College and Yonge Street here in Toronto. College and Yonge, 3 o'clock tomorrow. Please come. China has a weaker currency than the U.S. $1 equals 5 yuan. Also, everything's cheaper in China. What would cost $2,000 in the U.S. would cost $600 in China. Yeah, and also the fact that they're also building a currency with the Russians. They're building a currency called the renminbi with the Russians in order to challenge the American dollar on the global stage. That if people start trading in the renminbi instead of the U.S. dollar, it could cause major, major problems for the United States. So you're saying China is based. I mean, China, yeah. Which is why outsourcing is a viable option. $100 US is worth a lot more in China than the US. Well, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that the Chinese themselves are willing to operate under these terms, right? It's been the linchpin and the core of their success. Like, and it's becoming very obvious to deny that the Chinese model has benefits, right? Like the poverty alleviation alone, like an outright miracle that has happened in China, the increase in living standards, the increase in literacy, the increase in education rates, and it looks more and more like the Chinese are moving forward with like actual retirement plans. Like if you're 55, you get to retire instead of like 65, like here. They're actually moving forward, like something like the 4-day work week, which we hear a lot about. The Chinese are actually looking at and thinking like, oh, is this actually real? Could we do this 4-day work week thing? And so it might go in. And China has shown again and again its willingness to experiment, right? So the social credit system, which China gets a lot of heat for, right? Well, they attempted to implement something like a social credit system. The people responded to it. They didn't like it. And so they got rid of it, right? And communist societies are far more like here in North America, we have something called daylight savings time, which is the stupidest goddamn thing ever, right? Like, the stupidest goddamn thing ever is daylight savings time. It's so fucking dumb. All it does is mess with people. It costs the society a bunch of money. Nobody likes it. Here in Canada, the province that would have benefited the most from daylight savings time, Saskatchewan, didn't do it. Because they're just like, this is dumb. Just wake up earlier. Stop being babies about it. Have a good one, Aga. Good to see you, bud. Good opportunity to tell you all, please like, share, and subscribe. If you've got $1 jangling around your pocket, please consider donating to my Patreon. We need to be supporting leftist voices. I know I have rent to pay just like the rest of us. So if you've got a little bit of loose change, a little bit of money floating around, I could really use it for eating food and stuff. Yeah, eating food. So nice. So nice. Yeah, whenever people whine about China getting too strong, they're admitting that central planning works. Yeah, I mean, like, I can't believe that we're having to learn as a species or a people that having a plan and then enacting that plan is how you actually structure a society, right? Like, that's the shocking thing about the conversation we're having. That you should probably have a plan, and then enact that plan. I'm just so, like, over these guys. Too many losers tonight, man. Too many fucking losers tonight. I'm going nuclear on all this shit. Like, fuck this nonsense. Hey. Yeah, John Tory's failure of leadership on homelessness. Ignore the virgins. Yeah, dude. It's so frustrating, actually, because I am ostensibly their ally, right? Like, I actually have a great deal of sympathy for people who are in a position where they think doing that kind of thing is a good idea, right? Like, I understand where they're coming from. Like, I was a kid with the internet once, right? Like, I get it. It's just kind of brutal. Like, there's so many other things that you could do. Even if you were against me, right? Even if you were against me, there are so many other things that you could do to be a serious person, right? And instead we get this dumb shit, right? It's just dumb. Like, it's just dumb, annoying nonsense. I gotta look into that bot. We're all dealing with a declining standard of living in our own ways. I mean, I feel like I'm a very fortunate person because I don't really need much, right? Like, I really just need, like, a tiny little space. I actually feel like the space I'm in right now is too big for me. It's quite large for what I need. Like, I just need a very small, like, I think I really just need a bachelor's apartment, really, is what I need to be aiming at. And just, you know, just enough food to eat. And I don't, like, eat a bunch of food. I try to be mainly vegetarian. And like, that's it, really. Like, just the standard basic sort of stuff. And so as the declining standard of living begins to happen, I feel like the people who are going to feel it the most are the people who expected to be, like, homeowners, right? The people who thought that they were going to get, like, sweet cars and sweet houses and, like, have all this kind of stuff. Like, those are the people who are going to be feeling it the most, in my view. Like, the doctor, lawyer, engineers, right, who are being chased out of the housing market here in Canada. And it's just like... and I hope that those people realize that the problem that I'm faced with is the problems that they're faced with. That it's the same thing. And they don't really quite see it that way yet. Tory doesn't, nor has he ever done anything yet. He's just mayonnaise, dude. Like, he makes sense within the context of, like, a post-Rob Ford administration. Like, Rob Ford's administration was a total cluster. And I think at the end of Rob Ford's administration, people were really looking forward to, like, just like a calm, normal, like a Joe Biden figure, right? Just like mayonnaise, right? And that's what they got. They got John Tory, mayonnaise man. And honestly, like, Tory, I think, with the exception of what he did to the homeless in these encampments, I find that Tory has been, like, a reasonable mayor most of it. I actually found what he did to the encampments quite shocking. I found it to be quite shocking and out of character for him. Really, like, I find that when I disagree with Tory, it's not because he's doing something outrageous or something Looney Tunes. Like, I see where he's coming from, right? Like, a clear example is, like, a section of the Gardiner is crumbling. Well, in my perspective, the Gardiner needs to come down, and most city planners say that the Gardiner needs to come down. It's a highway that was built right along our harbor front, and it absolutely destroyed the harbor front. It's made Toronto a fucking eyesore of a city. It's terrible. It's ugly, and it's killed the harbor front. And a city like Chicago, which did the same thing we did, so we're not operating in a vacuum here. It already has torn down its highway that it built along its harbor front. And once it tore it down and reclaimed the land, it, like, created parks. And of course, you get your, like, development and all this kind of stuff. But the harbor front suddenly gets revitalized, right? Because you're not competing with this fucking gigantic eyesore that people are using as a way to just like treat your city like it's a thoroughfare. Like, get rid of that. And so a section of the Gardner was crumbling, and Tory, instead of tearing this thing down and saying like, yeah, this thing's got to start coming down, he repaired it, right? And he put the money into it. And of course, everybody knew, like, this is just sunk costs. Like, you're just sinking money into a dead project that inevitably we need to pull the switch on and get rid of this thing. But like, that's not outrageous, right? That's not outrageous for a mayor to be like, oh, well, we've got an infrastructure thing here, so we'll fix it up, right? And at least he's doing something about it, right? He's putting the funding in to actually do something. So it was all very reasonable. The homeless thing that he did, where he sicked the cops on the homeless, like that's left a mark on him. That's left a mark on his legacy, and it's unfortunate because I think he could have left office pretty cleanly, right? If it hadn't have been for that, he could have left office and people would have thought well of him. I think. I know I would have. I would have thought of John Tory as just like, yeah, okay, mayonnaise man, right? Still operating on behalf of capital, still operating on behalf of the wealthy, but not irrationally, not doing manic, crazy things like the Fords do, right? Seems like he had a pretty firm grip on what would be good for the city and what would be good for capital, right? But then just the clearing of these encampments, man, like really sad moment, and a tarnishing of his legacy, a big tarnishing of his legacy in my perspective. Anyway, guys, we're getting to the end of it. I've got a whining puppy here, so I'm going to go spend some time with. Just remember, guys, each and every one of you is a divine being, standing in divine energy. These capitalists are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to convince you something else is going on. Don't let them. Good luck. We're going to need it.